Okay. All right. Let me get some notes because it's just gonna be edited into a highlight anyway, so might as well just get out there. Okay. So I initially thought of making a very shitty PowerPoint presentation, but then I realized, oh, people more knowledgeable than me have already played this game, and they can already like foster better and more articulate thoughts and like critiques about the game. So why not just do a simple review? The itinerary for today would basically be I'm just gonna review the game, yeah, via a reaction to shout out to Mortismo Gaming. We're gonna do that, then the companions tier list, which I'll have to find in a bit because I kind of did this last minute. But yeah, overall, let me do something here quickly. The game is mid. I still stand by the opinion that the game is mid. We'll go through the reasons why for later. But yeah, as of now, let me just do something before Gang gets here. A bit of streaming magic. Yeah, we're basically just gonna be reviewing the game through a video, and I'll just add my thoughts on it. And I'll most likely be disagreeing with a lot of points made, but we'll see.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my re-review of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, a game that released a few years back and that I've covered extensively since then. But along the way, the game has changed pretty significantly, and after receiving its final paid DLC just a month or so ago, it felt like the right time to dive back into it and talk about how the game is as a total package these days, which was also just a convenient excuse to play the game a bunch again, as I'm very familiar with it. I originally backed the game when it was a Kickstarter project, played all through the beta, covered it then, the launch, all the DLCs, etc. since, and it has certainly come a very, very long way. And while some of its problems are still as fresh as the day it was launched, such as the extremely
Notice how Wendewag is right here,
high barrier to entry, others
pretty
are a
based.
little more recent, such as the lack of a version of the game that comes with all of the DLC, and how that DLC, if you own it, can affect the level curve of the game as you move through it. But with all of that in mind, as I move through this video, I'm going to try to stick to the stuff that is the most important here, and as such, I'll be referencing some videos where I expand on topics much more in depth, because a lot of these systems are extreme in terms of the time it would take to discuss and properly present them. And so I will try to drop links to those videos in the description if you're curious, but otherwise, let's
Okay, hold
get
on.
to it. Now, very generally speaking, I think
Okay, before it gets to his actual opinion, I need to do something really quickly. Just just so we're clear. Hmm. All right. I think yeah. Let's get into it for real. Forgot about something. And it's loading. Oh boy.
most of everything that has changed since this game launched has been for the better. They've added fun ways to play the game, new content, new quests, a handful of free DLCs that add some cool stuff, and of course all the quality of life updates, like the inventory showing you which scrolls your caster character can in fact learn from, or the ability to use potions from your inventory until you are fully healed or you simply run out of them with a single click of a button. All of those things were not present in the original version of the game. And that's the kind of thing I want to touch on in this video in particular, while also putting it in perspective of the current sort of gaming landscape with the CRPGs that have come and gone since. And obviously, the best place to start with that is the technical aspect of the game. Now, it's really no secret, I would say, that Wrath of the Righteous was a buggy game on launch. In fact, I believe my own launch review of it mentioned the fact that I was able to beat the game, but that many of the side quests in particular could be bugged to the point of simply not being able to complete them. And even that situation was a notable improvement over the release of their previous game, Kingmaker, which was extremely buggy when it launched. Which, unfortunately, Owlcat Games, the developer, no longer has the rights to Kingmaker specifically, so to speak, and thus
Huh.
they can't really do anything to fix that one. But what's the situation on that particular front these days? Now, truth be told, it's a little hard to gather all of that information. Now, I've heard the game runs a bit worse on console, though in general CRPGs I think are always going to be better served on an actual desktop PC as opposed to anything else. But even outside of just the console editions, I've also still seen reports of people running into other issues, but it's hard to say if those people are running into issues because they're using a mod for the game like Toybox, which lets you mess with basically every aspect of it, and as they still update the game, it got a hot fix as recently as just like 2 days ago from the time of this video. Those updates will potentially break your mods, and I mention that just because it's hard to say what is directly the game's fault when you're trying to look at the broader picture of how this game is running for most people. But speaking
Okay, so to be fair, I'm just gonna be reacting to the video because obviously they have more salient points to make compared to me. I'll just add in my own after this video's done, or like in between if I have something more to add, which is not much considering most React content, but I felt like this is the more streamlined and appropriate way to do it because I just want to like detox from this game for life. I don't plan on replaying the game, but I just want to like get another person's opinion from like 6 months ago. But yeah, what he said about toy box and stuff makes sense because like I genuinely can't tell if the finale of the game was like bugged out because of game or just toy box meddling. I think it's both. Because honestly, the only reason why it caved into toy box in the first place was because of auto crusades. The crusade system sucks ass. I'm sorry. Just go play Might and Magic instead. Like, what are you doing? And also, it just felt unpolished. And also, just some battles that are just I can't. I needed to do that nuke option, otherwise I couldn't progress the game. But overall, the experience was fine, considering Pathfinder logic with buffs, debuffs, and ooh, hang on. Do I still have that video? I do. Okay, I'll save that for later. That's like a very good argument piece. I better put it on hand actually. Right, yep, it's right there. Right there, officer. Right there. Ah, Jesus. Okay.
purely for myself, in the run up to this review, I played the game a ton. In fact, I ran through it about 6 times concurrently, and then I used a bunch of sort of save scumming basically to play through the different mythic paths for a total of about 10 or so playthroughs, one for each mythic path generally. And over the course of all that time with the game, this time through, the vast majority of what I ran into were small minor bugs, things clipping or pathing being an ever-present issue in these isometric RPGs, and other little things that could occasionally get kind of annoying. Now that
Pathfinding.
said,
Pathfinding.
I did run into a few larger bugs a couple of times. For starters, when I was playing as the swarm that walks Mythic Path, I was having a lot of trouble getting just mechanics to work properly. That Mythic Path is supposed to be able to summon clones of themselves, and whenever I would do this, some of those clones would just not be able to be controlled in any way, and then sometimes they would just disappear off of my hotbar. And so while it is very funny to mention that the swarm that walks was very buggy, it was actually very buggy in every sense of the
Damn.
word. So seeing stuff like that this far from release is certainly an annoyance, and if you run into something game breaking on your own, that's obviously not going to be a great experience, and unfortunately it still seems like there is a fair bit of potential for that to happen to someone. Another thing I ran into was some of my characters got stuck with what is called the helpless condition, which is something your character is granted when they are knocked prone or, stunned or paralyzed, things like that, and it's basically a huge reduction to their defenses. But after those characters got up, that condition just didn't go away, and I had to load back quite a bit of save time in order to get to a point where that wasn't there, which was kind of
Oh,
annoying. And
that's awful. Oh man. So okay. I'm gonna explain. So usually, um, you have this thing called defense, which is your armor class. It can range from like 20 to by the time you're at the end of the game, you're supposed to be at in your 40s or 30s. 30s is already pushing it, but like the higher the AC armor class is basically the higher your defense. That can be whittled down by status effects like, being knocked prone and whatnot. That makes you helpless, which means your AC, depending on if you wear like bulletproof armor or whatnot, it doesn't change, but otherwise, yeah, it's like a huge penalty to your AC. And I'm not even sure because I don't really check, but like if it actually doesn't change from like getting back up, that's kind of bad. Hmm.
Then lastly, once I unlocked the main hub of the game, Dresden, you're supposed to be able to click the rest button from anywhere in town and it will teleport you to your citadel. However, if I did this while someone was waiting in the citadel to talk to me, the game would bug out and soft lock on me every single time. And I
Oof.
was forced to quit out of it and then reload a save, which was another annoyance to be sure. So very generally speaking, considering the amount of time I played this game and the many times I fully completed it and all its side quests, I wouldn't be afraid of bugs going into this, but the potential to run into a serious problem is certainly there, and that's unfortunate to see, to be sure. And hopefully they will get any major lingering problems sorted out with an upcoming sort of final patch that I have heard they have planned for later this year, beyond just, of course, the DLCs having been out. Now, next up, I want to talk about difficulty and character creation. So if you've ever heard me talk about this game or reference it to someone who's looking to get into it, one of the first things you'll hear me say is that this game has a high barrier to entry. It throws
Correct.
an extreme amount of information at you, mostly due to the rule set the game uses, Pathfinder 1E. And while I've been playing around and messing...
Whoa. I thought this was second edition. They actually used the first edition for a 2020 game? Are you serious? Oh my goodness, that explains so much. Usually, the lower the edition, the more like exploits or bullshit you have to deal with. That's why, I guess, maybe not for Pathfinder, but for example, in D&D, 3E used to be the shit because it can like, depending on how you like tweak your characters, they can be really overpowered. But then everything in 5th edition was catered to a wider demographic / audience, which means it's kind of sterilized, to put it very bluntly. So, and even as like a aspiring DM, dungeon master is like, I'm reading these rules and the changes they're making, especially the new 2024 rule set. It is so ass. They just kept nerfing and nerfing and nerfing everything. Certain things like meta magic gone, paladin stuff gone. It just makes it so neutered because like if they're keeping the same shit from the monster manual, they're so overpowered. It's like, oh, it makes sense, right? Because it's a team game. One stick, you just snap it, it's gone. But if you have a bundle of sticks, then it's not as hard. But like, still, I get that they're encouraging team play, but like, I don't know. You just keep nerfing everything. It's just, hmm. Third edition's the best though. Just saying.
with
You're
that
right.
system since
Yeah.
high school, basically. It's kind of second nature to me at this point. But asking someone to learn that incredibly, let's say, crunchy system is a tall order. And if you ask people online about where to go for resources to learn about it, truth be told, they're probably going to reference you to my own videos. But my point being, some of those videos that I've taken the time to use to explain the system to people can be hours long. My new player's guide is like 2 hours, and that is a lot to ask of someone. And I think that's important to really drive home up front to people. But the good news is the game has an incredibly modular difficulty system, and that is something I love seeing these days, and I was very happy to see that Wrath of the Righteous here was sort of on the forefront of a lot of bigger RPGs kind of pushing in that direction, where not only are there difficulty settings or sort of pre-settings that you can make or choose from, but rather you can customize the specifics of the difficulty. And while it's easy to tell somebody to just throw the game on story and, try to do their best to learn the mechanics before bumping it up, the modular difficulty, I think, is fantastic because it lets you customize a lot of that experience, and that's pretty great on its own. But they've actually gone a few steps farther than that if you're willing to dig into it, because there are actually pre-made characters if you just have no idea where to start when you get to character creation, and for every single one of the base classes, you can actually select a pre-made build for it. And choosing those options while at the same time messing around with the difficulty will hopefully get you to a place where it's a little easier to move into what this game has to offer, because otherwise it's a lot. Now, very generally, I will say that if you are new to this game, you probably want to play on a little below normal. Normal can be decently challenging if you just have no idea what this rule set is about. And
Yes.
as you move up in difficulty, you need to understand not only how to increase your own stats and make the numbers on your own character go up, but also how to make them go down on the enemy, how to debuff them. And while that's simple enough in practice, the rule set makes it a little more complicated complicated because you have to understand what bonuses stack and what doesn't. The fact that
Oh my god.
most bonuses of the same
Shit.
type won't stack, but there are
Why is the
exceptions.
notification showing up? Okay, there's supposed to be a notification. There you go. I really gotta fix that echo system. Thank you so much for following, baby Alexis underscore 7p69. Thank you for the follow. We really appreciate it. So we're basically gonna be doing React content. One for shout out to Mortismo Gaming. I did not watch a single one of his videos before finishing the game. So I've recently finished Outcat's Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. As the title suggests, I think the game is mid. However, I'm going to explain to you why through a React video or two. Yeah, that's it. That's the chill video of today. And then I'll probably just be playing the end of like another game, Rogue Trader, which is a superior game, by the way, compared to Wrath of the Righteous, in my opinion. In my opinion.
To that in specific instances, and for every rule there's an exception. And because of that, the higher difficulties of this game are really only for when you've actually truly started to understand and master that system, because otherwise you are setting yourself up for a very bad time. But with that in mind...
Oh, what's this? He also uses the Belt of Shadow Demon, one of the most overpowered abilities in the game. So you might be thinking, oh, are demons evil in this universe power? Well, no, not if you're their master, because there's this item in the game called Belt of Shadow Demon or whatever it's called. So if you use this on a spellcaster, like let's say any of these three here, yes, that includes the furry. If you use like let's say a very high level spell like Fireball or something similar, it summons a free Shadow Demon, and it's like resistant to almost anything in the game, which basically makes it like a second tank if you don't have tanks in your build already in your party. It's because it's like a ghost. It's like the ghost Pokemon from Pokemon. Most physical attacks can't really hit it, except for like very specialized instances of magic, which is a whole kind of words of itself. But basically, Shadow Demons are like the best tanks in the game, especially for summons.
All of the pre-made builds that the game has for classes are perfectly fine on normal, which includes companions. All of your companions will have a sort of default build that you can choose to either customize or expand upon, but you can just take the sort of preset level ups, and that's perfectly workable for normal difficulty. But
Correct.
As you start moving those difficulties up, you will unfortunately start to get into a point where less and less becomes viable as you go. Which brings me to character creation, and one of the main points I want to make there. With the benefit of hindsight, I would say that character creation, while incredibly expansive, could also stand to tone it down a little bit, frankly. There are, I believe it's like 29 or 30 full-blown classes. There are a ton of prestige classes, which are classes you have to meet the prerequisites for. You can multi-class all of these. All of the individual classes have 6 to 7 archetypes generally, and these are like subclasses for people more familiar with D&D, and they themselves can be multi-classed with other archetypes, etc. And there's just a ton of these. And what's more, though, it's only expanded since the game launched. They've added more archetypes, a brand new class in the form of the Shifter, but the problem with this, I would say, is that from their previous game, Kingmaker, they did not at any point cull the more useless stuff. You see, my issue with this these days in particular, with all of these added archetypes and everything, and even at launch a little bit, is that there are not only suboptimal choices in character creation, there are choices that are basically just wrong. Choices where I would only play that archetype if I was playing on the absolute lowest difficulty, or they have just zero relevance to the adventure. My go-to example of this is the Defender of the True World Druid, which gets a bunch of bonuses to fighting fey creatures that there frankly just aren't many of. And while there is a case to be made for some of them popping up in places like the Treasure of the Midnight Isles DLC, instances like that in character creation I think would have been the opportunity to cull this a little bit, to rein it in. And if
it makes sense. Well, less is more sometimes, especially in this case. Like, for example, in this game, what I actually dislike is that it's too linear to the point where, okay, basically in this game, you are basically thrust into a fucking war. You're basically like spoiler. You become like the leader of the Fifth Crusade against an army of horde of demons. And the issue is that most of the time you're just gonna be fighting demons. And compared to Kingmaker, from what I've heard, I haven't played Kingmaker, but I've played this game. The problem with WTR is that you're mostly going to be fighting demons, and if you don't specialize to fight demons, like let's say you spec into this guy over here, the DOTW, whatever the fuck, where you're only good against fake creatures. It's like your class is useless. You're basically outclassed no matter what. So I get that they want to stick to like the Pathfinder. I guess this is the first edition rule set. I'm pretty sure they didn't really change anything. And you compare this to like let's say Baldur's Gate 3, where they've actually made changes that make sense. They actually made the monk viable in the Baldur's Gate 3, otherwise no one would touch them. And you might be wondering, hey, Par, where the hell is the Ranger? If that's the case, no one wants to play fucking Ranger. No one, not a single human being wants to play Ranger in 5th edition. Not a single human being. But yeah, worst class in the game. But I'm glad that Larian Studios actually like took the benefit of hindsight, stepped back a bit, and looked at the classes and went, oh, we should probably like tweak this for an actual fucking video game, because otherwise you get shit like this. And that's why I think Pathfinder kind of falls down from that regard. I've actually done some research on some of their builds, and before playing this game, I only knew about 5th edition D&D and some 3E because I'm just classy like that, right? But yeah, I just went with a multi-classing into fighter and ranger. The problem with this is that multi-classing, it may sound cool, but the only reason why people multi-class is because they simply want like specialized features. Like let's say fighter gives you an extra attack at like level 5, and they just stop from there because why punch one time when you can punch twice in a turn, because more chances means more opportunity, right? So yeah, I knew from the beginning because of the mythic path system, I basically get buffs no matter what. So choosing like a really shitty build, there won't be any consequences, right? Compared to like let's say Kingmaker, where you're stuck at top 20, from what I've heard anyway. So yeah, speaking into part ranger, part fighter as a joke. Well, depending on the build you go for, because with feats and everything. But yeah, I'm glad that this game is like, I think Mandalore Gaming said it best. Shout out to Mandalore Gaming. He basically said that it's basically like filling up a freaking application for the DMV. Like it literally takes like it's like the most, well, I would say well thought out. It's more like one of the most diverse character creation options I've seen in a computer role playing game for sure. It obviously rivals The Sims, but like not in terms of drip, but like content wise. There's like so many options. Just look at the top left of the screen, and meanwhile I'm just here going, oh, there I'm going human, part fighter, part ranger. Oh, so no magic whatsoever, because magic systems in any game is confusing, and I don't really want to like. I could go for it, but I prefer like I prefer to be more on the safe balance side. Call me a coward, but it's just common sense. I prefer like half magic, half martial, because at least there's like some versatility instead of like being a squishy, doughy, summon portal to hell fucking character all the time. I mean, to each their own, right? But either way, yeah. He's made some really good points thus far. I'll continue this.
If they ever make another game in the Pathfinder series here, that's honestly is something that I hope Owlcat does, if it happens to be them making it, of course, because while it is certainly too late to do it to this game now, obviously you don't want to take any options away from people here, and it's a single player game. If you want to play a bad build, so to speak, on a lower difficulty, that is certainly your choice. If I was looking to improve the next game, at the very least, I would try to get data on the classes and archetypes people are playing the absolute least of, cut those, and then pull more interesting options that have more impactful choices to be made into the next game. And that could be a way for them to try to tone down some of the very intimidating character creation specific to this game. Because what I hear a lot of is simply that people go to start this game, they see character creation, have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and then they stop. And that's where things like what I just mentioned could help out, but also the point at which I would say just pick a pre-made build, try a lower difficulty, and try to learn the system before you really get too carried away with character creation. Nonetheless, though, there are a handful of things about character creation I want to mention besides just walking people through the specifics of it, and that is that every character you make can choose to either worship a deity or be an atheist, whatever floats your boat, but all of the deities in the game and the option of atheism actually do have extra bits of dialogue and moments specific to them, usually only like a couple per option, but sometimes when you do something in-game that directly relates to that god's sort of sphere of influence, they will intervene, and this can even result in things like buffs or just extra dialogue and moments that I think really add something to the title in a way.
I wouldn't know because I play atheist, and that maybe relate to Ember a lot more. Also, this character portrait, that Mortismal has right now. It reminds me of a grown-up version of what's his name, Fig from How to Train Your Dragon. I think that's pretty badass.
You might not necessarily expect when you're making that choice. Another thing, though, is the actual cosmetic portion of character creation. This was a lot more basic when the game launched, but thanks to a handful of free updates, there is a transmog system in the game, so you'll be able
A
to
what system?
actually change and outfit your character's armor and everything to make them look the way that you want based on the things you found. And they've also added a whole host of tattoos and color options and everything, which I mentioned because this is the type of game that does not typically do a lot of that, but it's still nice to see. Now, the last thing I want to mention about character creation, specifically for this video anyway, is that Pathfinder 1E still sticks to alignment requirements where like paladins have to be lawful good, most monks have to be lawful, that kind of thing. And that can be a real issue when you're choosing your mythic path because mythic paths also have alignment restrictions, and this can cause conflicts that somebody unfamiliar with the game might not even necessarily think of, which is something to know. Now, if you have any other questions beyond that when you're watching this video, like more information about prestige classes, how ability scores work, the basic building blocks of the system, I've got videos for all of that, but it's a little much to go into here. Next up, though, I want to talk about the story setup of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, because if you're unaware, this game actually is not necessarily a entirely original story. That said, they did take a lot of liberties with it. So this game, just like Kingmaker, is based on what is called an adventure path. This is a preset sort of adventure that you can play in the tabletop version of Pathfinder. That means a few things. For starters, the sort of general flow of the campaign is very much so out there. You can see it online for yourself, but also that there is a sort of canonical outcome from this adventure. But this game and the just nature of tabletop games in general are not really concerned about any of that. In fact, just this game takes a somewhat different route than the original tabletop version in a whole host of ways. Different characters, different moments, etc. So it's certainly not one for one. And in terms of the official lore or setting, the setting itself is only about 9 to 10 years or so past where this takes place in the broader history. So all of Pathfinder's adventure paths have a sort of parity with the real life date, in this case 2024. So every adventure that is released for Pathfinder is basically meant to take place 2,700 years exactly in terms of the Galarian calendar from today in the real world. So their most recent adventure, Pact Breaker, took place during 4724. As a result, Wrath of the Righteous here takes place over a couple of years, but got started in 4714 or 15, I forget. In the game it's 15. And canonically, it ended in 4718 with the closure of the World Wound, which is an interesting tidbit of information just because that will tell you that this game actually takes place a few years after Kingmaker, the original title, though they are largely unrelated, with only really just a few characters popping up in between the two that, of course, are still the same person. With that in mind, what is this story actually about? What is the setup for this tabletop adventure, even? Well, basically, there's a giant blight on the world of Galarian around the nation of Mindev and what used to be a place called Old Sarkoris, before something called the World Wound opened up and destroyed the entire country of Sarkoris. But what's worse, the World Wound started spewing demons into the world because it is connected directly to the Abyss, the home plane of the demons. This led to a bunch of different crusades in order to stop them, and eventually, with the help of a god, they erected what are called the Ward Stones. There's a giant magical barrier around the World Wound that keeps the demons mostly contained, as the Crusades do their best to try to stop, obviously, the invasions of demons. And this has been going on for about 100 years at the start of this game. There have been 4 previous Crusades.
I should probably just add this just in case some people might not be aware of what's going on. In bright like font, I really need to add this in case people get mad or something. Hold on. I've been practicing whistling a lot because I'm a clown and it freaks the fuck out of people from below. There you go. This should keep people off this should keep the casuals away from the game for now.
And over the course of this game, we're going to lead the 5th Crusade. After an opening heroic act where we save the city of Canabris, which, thanks to a sabotaged wardstone, falls under the invasion of a host of demons. You, however, miraculously manage to turn the tide of some less than organized demons after this initial invasion, before your heroics gets you placed at the forefront of the Fifth Crusade, where you're going to lead the charge against the demons again, while at the same time following your own path to power via the game's mythic mechanics. As one of the defining features of this game, and
His voice reminds me of LGR. Shout out to LGR, who basically reviewed most of like the Sims 4 DLC and they just gave up. My God, the Sims 1 and 2 re-release. What the hell were they cooking? They put so much into the advertising, but couldn't even fix the fucking game. Thanks, EA. Very cool.
the source of a lot of its replayability is the ability to take on the power of an otherwise supernatural being, things like angels, demons, liches, and you'll be able to become those, and it will shape the very nature of the crusade you are leading against the demons of the world wound, and the nature and morality of that is largely up to you. And the main thing I want to mention there is simply that I think the replayability and just the concept of the mythic paths and what they did for this game were tremendous. For instance, the Lich sees you actually resurrecting a bunch of notable characters throughout the game to serve as your undead companions. They also touch the actual crusade mode by a lot of the enemies that you defeat in combat in the army battle mode get resurrected as undead troops to fuel those fires, so to speak. And that's just one mythic path. Every single one of them has something like that that adds a ton of flavor and context to a situation you might not otherwise see, including unique quests and things for each individual path, which culminates in about 12 different endings, like 13 if you want to get specific. And that's not even touching on the myriad of variations that can apply to any one companion or place that you touch along the course of the game. It's a tremendous story, and I really did enjoy it. With that in mind, though, it's a pretty long game. For most people, you're probably looking at like 80 to 100 hours conservatively. For somebody like myself who's very familiar with it, even on my first runs, I think just on normal playing through it, it was like 70-ish, and now these days where I've only ever gotten more familiar with this specific title, I can run through normal very quickly in about 50 or so hours if I'm stopping to do everything. But basically your time spent with this game, even in just a single playthrough, is going to vary a lot. So from there, let's talk a little bit about those progression systems. So obviously we have leveling up, mythic paths, as well as your gear. Now leveling up is pretty straightforward. Like a lot of TTRPGs, your max level is 20. Along the way, you're effectively, every time you level up, getting a class point that you can then spend on a class that you meet the qualifying prerequisites for. Now in most cases, especially if you're new to the game, that's just going to be the class you started the game with. But you can do things like multi-class, take on a prestige class, or do anything you want with the builds, really. And that part is way too much to mention in a single video. There is so much build variety and depth to all of the characters you can make here, who all can play and feel differently. Makes for a really, really in-depth system. And that's actually where one of the DLCs, like the Treasure of the Midnight Isles, can come in, as it has its own separate roguelite mode where you can move through that progression much, much faster. And it's a great place to test ideas and builds out. But leveling aside, really the big draw is, of course, the mythic paths. So this progression system is incredibly fun. I knew I wanted to play more of this game the second I started messing around with this, but basically at the end of Act 1, you're going to get access to your mythic powers. This starts off really small. You just become a mythic hero with some incredible abilities that give you a lot of resistances. But then as you move to retake the city of Dresden, which later becomes your home base, that mythic power transforms you, or begins transforming you, into something more, which is where you'll get to pick a mythic path based on what you found and unlocked. There are 2 available by default, Angel and Demon, and then at rank 3 there's at least 4 more you can unlock right there, with a few more opening up to be unlocked in the late game. And each of these can be a thing that you seek out and find and learn more about, and then decide whether or not that's something you want to do or a path you want to follow. And beyond just what it does for your character on a stat level, as each of these comes with their own abilities and powers and effects on the crusade mode of the game, it also comes with a huge narrative focus, as it will change the very nature of the way people talk to you and outcomes that are then available to you. So while
Okay, that's true. So initially, I knew what I wanted to do, So I made my guy basically role playing, right? So my guy's name was Charity and Embarrassment. Very cool, tongue in cheek way of saying character advancement. Yeah, that's literally how I came up with the fucking name. He's supposed to be this ordinary human, um, but then he was stripped of his paladin status due to reasons, and he was supposed to be to put it very simply, what's the name? Tiefling. He's supposed to be a tiefling that died from birth, but then he was reincarnated into a human, which is it's a whole other thing. But basically, yeah, I wanted him to be a demon because of that origin story, and then yeah, it actually makes a difference. When I played as demon at first, it was like a demon being on the human side of the crusade against the demons, like kind of hypocritical. A lot of people were like kind of Zeus at the beginning, especially like those like really stringent like Regiel, for example. He's already like coming up with his own schemes, like Batman contingency plan style. But like yeah, even when I did well in the crusade mode, people were like still like, oh, there's a stigma of like having a demon as a commander, against the demons, right? That's just hypocritical in and of itself. So I was like, okay, there has to be a way for me to like change course, right? Like I just want to do this for the funsies, and after all, in order to know your enemy, you must know yourself. Easy, right? Just become a demon, just become like a spy. And I basically hoodwinked basically one of the major demon antagonists in the game. Because what's better than a double cross and a triple cross, right? So when I went back to the screen, because you can choose at a certain point before the end game, I did not unlock like for example Aeon, Azada, or like Lich. And I'm pretty sure the basics were Angel, Demon, and Trickster. And I just hated those options because they're just meh. So I managed to unlock a Golden Dragon one because it actually ties to the beginning of the game where, the Dragon Lady, she died for you. So it's like, okay, I might as well just pay it forward by being a Golden Dragon, succeed where they came off of. And I thought it would make for an interesting parallel. But then when I played through that Mythic Path, not much happened. And I heard there's going to be an update for that. So thank God they actually listened. How can actually listen to their consumer base, their fans, which is good. It's kind of like Baldur's Gate 3, except Baldur's Gate 3, they're basically working in a sweatshop. It's basically like crunching numbers and stuff. And they actually managed to get on time. And with the recent update for Baldur's Gate 3, patch 8, they added not just new subclasses, but they finally have a photo mode. God damn, I want to play Baldur's Gate 3, but it will be like from until like at least from a year from now. But back to like specifics. So yeah, I really like the Mythic Path system in this game, but I don't think it edges it out for being mid because you're basically forced into a crusade system. It's just a personal preference, like I said before. It's too linear in its design for what is supposedly a role playing game. I get it. You're like the Lord Commander of the Fifth Crusade. That's pretty cool and all, but like certain choices are pretty much bound by this like honor system. Like you're a commander no matter what happens. You can't just say no. You're pretty much forced to it because you're in the middle of the hotbed of like a demon invasion. Like what else are you gonna do? Flee? If you just run away like Far Cry style, you can just end the game right there. But no, they gotta force you into it. Where I think Kingmaker, I would prefer Kingmaker or Rotator overall, but because like even though you're like managing kingdoms and whatnot, or like a freaking spaceship, you still have some degree of autonomy. It's more open, I would say. I prefer that over like just being stuck to one path the whole time. Yeah.
While the same core events play out no matter what, of course, each of these mythic paths has the potential to make it feel like a very different experience, which is what I've always loved about it. And then there is your gear, of course. Now, all of those builds wouldn't do us much good if we were limited in gear, and gear has always been pretty over the top, but since the game has launched, they've added unique appearances to a lot of special items. They've added more of those special items in the form of DLC and just generally throughout the game, some of which being available in the main story of the game means you can get even more overpowered than you initially could, and beyond just what there is to leveling and how complicated that is, that can be even further complicated by just the sheer amount and variety of gear that you can get and equip with interesting effects to see how they interact with certain things. Which is why it's probably no surprise that when it comes to things like progression and character building, this game really is just unrivaled in that space. While it is certainly over the top for a lot of people, and in some ways that's to the game's detriment, as I'll touch on here in just a second, it really is a tremendous experience for people who enjoy that type of thing, because in that regard, I think this game is simply the best at what it does. But that does come at a slight quality of life cost, because there's not just your character. There's you, all of your companions, any potential animal companions that come from the classes they have, the mythic power progression system, and you have to manually level up pretty much all of your characters if you're not using a pre-made build. And that
Yep.
gets extremely tedious to stop and do every so often when you level up. Which is why, of all the quality of life additions to this game, I was really sad to see that they never added a sort of like build saver where you could effectively say right at character creation or something, or simply have a system that allows you to sort of pre-cache builds in the way that they do with the pre-made builds to allow you to sort of auto level up with exactly what you know you want as you move through the game. I think that would have been tremendous and is probably the only major quality of life feature that I think is lacking these days. But from there, let's talk about the gameplay and world of this one. So
Finally.
the game starts out relatively small in the city of Canabris and then spans to a country-spanning adventure where we're managing a crusade mode, moving our own characters around, and there's a lot to know. A lot of that is traditional CRPG gameplay, like in any individual location, where you can manage the formation of all your characters, move them through an area, engage in various combat encounters or other events and the like where you'll simply talk to characters, etc. If you've ever played a CRPG before, just very normal stuff, I would say. But a few things I want to mention in regards to how this works on a functional level. So when you're on the world map, be that in Canabris or the larger world map, it's important to set up how your characters are distributed to their camp jobs, basically. Because if you bring up the rest menu on the world map, you'll see that all of your characters in party are assigned to a role here, such as camp camouflage, divine rituals, or night watch, that kind of thing, and these have actual effects. So even if you're not resting, the character in your camouflage spot basically decides your role against random encounters to see whether or not you fail and have to engage with those. And then your divine protection rituals has to deal with the world wound's corruption. The world wound is not just a physical wound in the land, it also oozes corruption, which of course has effects on the surrounding landscape and also the people who are nearby. Any length of time, basically, will see you slowly corrupted by the forces at play here. And in order to protect against that, you have to assign someone to divine protection rituals, which can reduce the buildup. But what's more, as that corruption piles up, it applies actual debuffs to your characters as you move throughout the world. And in order to get rid of that, you have to rest at a properly safe place, like your main base, or later on, a shelter that you set up in one of your forts that you'll take via the crusade mode. Now, very broadly, I like this system quite a bit. Mostly just because it's better than managing things like rations or resources for every rest, but also still gives you an incentive to head back to your base and engage with all the encounters there. Another thing I want to mention, though, is the game's lack of, mostly, timers. So Kingmaker had a lot of sort of timed missions where you had a certain amount of time to go do things before they would fail, and Wrath of the Righteous takes a much more relaxed approach to that. There are effectively two timers in the entire game that are actually like counting days specifically, whereas everything else is simply you need to complete this quest by the end of this chapter, which the journal will tell you about. And that's a much more relaxed way of going about sort of putting a time limit on something without actually limiting the player in terms of what they have time to go do, which means you don't ever have to worry about how fast you're moving, really, outside of two cases. One is all the way at the beginning of the game in Canabris, where you are initially finding your way through the city. After a couple of days, your base will be attacked by demons and you can fight them off. And in most cases...
Okay. This one was the first of many that made me really have frustrations with this game. I prefer playing in turn-based is because there's flow, and I won't have to like rush things when I'm talking with chat because I can just take, a leisurely pace at my own time, right? Oh man, thank God that guy mentioned to play this in like real time because it literally took 2 hours just to finish this section. This type of defense bullshit. We nearly lost too. If it weren't for my archers just pelting the rest of the enemies, while Irma and Yanos were just standing at the freaking entrance doing jack from shit, even though we literally cleared out 90% of the enemies. I was like, oh man, if I were to throw someone into a pot of coal, I have like one option, then that's it. But yeah, because this game really encourages you to use like turn-based instead of real time, because real time is more like rushing without thinking. And this game requires you to think a lot. It is a strategy game after all, so
it's usually better to just let that attack happen because the rewards for having fought it off are much better than you would get otherwise. So there's not really a lot of time pressure there. And then the other one is actually for the secret ending. There is a date at which you need to enter the last area of the game in order to trigger the secret ending, which is like the real world equivalent of April 16th through the 21st. Beyond that,
right.
though, you're pretty much free to do everything in a chapter at your leisure for the most part, which I enjoyed quite a bit more so than Kingmaker's approach, especially when it comes to things like companions. Companions are a big part of this game, and I'm not going to go over them individually because there is a ton of them. I recently made a ranking video for all the companions if you're interested, and some of them are locked to mythic paths specifically. Those undead companions that you get as a lich, the Azada mythic path gets a Havoc dragon, just to name a few, and each of them is going to add some flavor to the game, often introducing factions and lore to the player, such as Regil and the Hell Knights, Sela and the Paladins of Iomedae, and the list goes on and on. Companions are a big part of basically any party-based RPG, of course, and this is certainly no exception. They all have their own quests. Many of those quests can go multiple directions, some giving you evil or good variants of that companion based on how you completed things, and ultimately decides how they fare in the ending, of course. And that's to say nothing of the banter and all that as we move through the title. But one thing that hasn't changed in that regard is simply the fact that voice acting is hit or miss. They have added a lot of voice acting since the
I'll get to this portion a little bit more specifically when we get to the companion tier list. I have a lot to say about the companions in this fucking game. Oh boy. Just wait and see.
beginning of this game, but the game is not fully voiced, and it is a lot of reading. For someone like myself, I don't really care about that at all. I would honestly rather read it than listen to someone say it. But I realize that I'm in the minority on that, and most
True.
people prefer a voice-acted game, and this simply did not have the budget to do that. As
Yep.
remember, this was originally a Kickstarter title that I personally would put in the AA space. Though I imagine with things moving in that direction for Owlcat that anything they put out from now on will likely have more and more voice acting, as it's a consistent criticism of their games that they've honestly been trying to address. For instance, their last DLC for this was voice acted. So that's something that has improved over the course of the game. But beyond just those individual things, a few other things I wanted to mention were, for starters, having played through this again with all of these characters, I think it's safe to say they might have gotten a little carried away with all the secrets and puzzles in this game. I didn't think too much about it when I originally started playing it because everything was so new and fun to discover, but having to go through this again on all these playthroughs, I found myself getting very tired of doing some of these puzzles, which might just be fatigue on my part. But when you have places like Ninio's quest, one of our companions, which is a dungeon called Enigma that is nothing but puzzles, it occurs to me that, you know what, I think they might have overdone it a little bit, which might be why.
Yeah. Another frustration, one of the bigger ones, aside from that timer bullshit at Act 1, which is just spring upon you for no reason. That fucking quest. You need to do that quest in order to get the secret ending. Because you need to like do a certain thing against the boss, otherwise you're just kind of screwed. Thank God for Toy Box, because I just didn't want to like meddle that shit. And when I saw like the leaps and hurdles you had to do just to like get the freaking quest done, it's like it's like the meme of the lady doing gymnastics, like just doing hula hulas and stuff. You know the one. It's just mental gymnastics, and it's just I don't like puzzle games in like as a subgenre in a main. It's like a I don't like puzzle games as add-ons in a game in general because if I wanted to do that, I'll just play Sudoku on my own time. I came here to have fun, not the other way around, and it's kind of like a main grievance. The best example would be like to a small extent the recent Pokemon games and how they try to implement puzzles. Obviously, they dumbed it down a little bit more past Generation 5 because kids, but also even back then during Gen 1, Fire Red and Leaf Green I consider one of the best Pokemon remakes of all time, right next to like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But it was only bogged down because, that ice puzzle to get to Articuno. But then I realized something. You get Surf. You can just surf from your home base all the way back to the last gym. So you can technically just skip that puzzle entirely. So Gen 1 is peak world building design, that's for sure. And then they just teetered off ever since then. What I'm basically trying to say is puzzles suck. No one liked them. Just ask BioWare.
They reined some of that in their most recent title, Rogue Trader. But the last main thing I want to mention here is
what did you say about Rogue Trader?
Some of that in their most recent title, Rogue Trader. Overdone it a little bit, which might be why they reined some of that in their most recent title, Rogue Trader.
But that's probably for the best. Even in Rogue Trader, like I played it off stream, at least until Act 5. Some of the puzzles I was like, okay, screw this. It was like the spark that kindled the fart that was me, because the puzzles. It's just the moment where it's just nothing more than just clicking here and there. It just became like a point and click adventure game, which I like, but I don't like it as a subgenre in an action game. It just bogs down the pacing and flow to me. It's either you go one road or the other. Just don't take two lanes. Just pick a lane, And it's kind of like why I kind of think it bumps down a few points down for this game. It's because they were really ambitious with this. They wanted to make an RPG, they wanted to make like a crusade system, strategy thing, magic kind of deal, but it's like so poorly done in execution, it's barely polished. Not to mention the presentation from earlier where he mentioned it's not even fully voice acted. So you have sections of the game where you're like, oh, I'm really immersed in the story, there's voice acting, I'm really getting into it, and then suddenly it's just reading. You go from people speaking to just muted text. It's so jarring. It's so weird. But like I'm comparing this execution to like Rogue Trader, where it's like, okay, Rogue Trader is like, okay, at least when they stop, it makes sense. But there's like certain moments where there's like pathos or like an emotional like catharsis, and it's like it just stops abruptly. It's kind of like when you're at the final act of the game, you're just going through the motions, emotional swelling music's playing, you're almost at the finish line, and it just stops abruptly. That's why it just kills off some like the mood I have for the game. It's just like a complete turn off. At least in my opinion.
The last main thing I want to mention here is the Crusade mode. So Crusade mode is always been a bit of a, I would say, sticking point for a lot of people. Owlcat likes to put a sort of side system in a lot of their RPGs, and some of these are directly from the tabletop version, so that makes sense. But for this game, that is the Crusade mode. At the start of Act 2, you're going to be put in charge of some armies on the world map. And this...
Okay, we have to play it. Where's the theme? I have to. This is the only bit I'll do, because Crusade mode takes up half of the game. It is such a prominent part of the game that I have to do this. I have to play the theme. I have to play the theme. Like the entire time while the Crusade part is like being mentioned, I'm just gonna play this on loop in the background. I have to. You don't know what it is. Wait, I just want to check if this is the actual one. Hang on. Yeah, let's just keep this in the background while the Crusade portion is being mentioned.
Part's pretty simple. You just recruit troops every week, basically, and then fight off the armies you run into. Very straightforward. But in Act 3, this expands to include your city of Dresden, as well as forts and strongholds you'll make. Now, in those forts and Dresden, you'll be able to put up buildings based on your resources. These will do things to, of course, augment the troop generation and things like that for your armies, giving you the ability to teleport instantly to certain locations on the world map, which is very helpful in the late game. And then in Act 3, they also introduce your councils. Your companions will also serve as council members for the Crusade, and they'll present a bunch of options for you every time you level up one of your main 4 Crusade stats: military, leadership, diplomacy, etc. And the choices you make in these council meetings will have effects on the overall ability of your army, including things like the type of troops you're able to recruit, as well as other things like just passive effects and the like. And this is also affected by your mythic path, as the troops you're able to recruit and certain powers you'll have on the world map are actually dependent upon that. And you'll need to manage a few armies, including assigning them a general in a sort of Heroes of Might and Magic way that sees you fighting battle.
Just play Heroes of Might and Magic. Just play the actual game. Don't come to this game just for this. Look at the screen right now. I want you to look at the screen and tell me, would you play this for 40 hours straight? Think about this for a second. Would you play something that is implemented in this way for 40 hours? Exactly. Just play by your magic instead. I get that Alchemy was trying something new each time. Even Rogue Trader isn't like, susceptible to like this. I mean, it isn't immune to this. It has like space combat, ship combat, which is essentially this. But I prefer the ship combat because there's actual like stakes with just one ship versus like an armada compared to this micromanaging bullshit, which is atypical of a Crusade. But like, especially if you're like turned off by the linearity of this game, you're just gonna hate it even more with Crusade mode.
Battles on the world map against incoming demon armies. Now, honestly, this mode never bothered me, but since launch, they've even improved this by including a whole host of quality of life improvements, like a speed up option, a sort of auto win option if the other army is weak, and a few other things to help you get past this. Now, the catch is that Crusade mode encompasses more than just this army stuff, because in issuing decrees from Crusade mode, you can do things like the research you'll need for the secret ending, or in the case of a few mythic paths, specific things you need to have done in order to, say, build a ziggurat as a lich. However, they have a Crusade auto mode. Basically, if you don't like this system, you can turn it on auto mode at the cost of items and rewards that you would normally get that here you simply won't. And in the case of your mythic paths and quests that require Crusade events, it just basically assigns those a timer, and after so many days have passed, they'll sort of auto-complete that step in the quest for you. And I tell you all that to basically say that I think they've done basically as much as they can do to make this system as involved or as hands-off as you would like to make it, with, I would say...
Okay, so also one more thing. Not only are you locked off from like rewards and mythic quests stuff, you're also locked off from the secret ending as well. Just to keep things clear, you're also locked off from the secret ending if you choose auto crusade immediately. But luckily, you can just change the difficulty whenever you want if you're a baby. Or if you just use toy boxes, anything can be mitigated with toy box. But you know, that comes with its own host of glitches. The biggest one I would say is when Baphomet decided to just walk out of the map and just say fuck this. He just pulled his Sans Undertale and said, fuck it, it's forever my turn. If I can't win, no one can. So that's kind of based. But at the same time, screw you, dude. I want to finish the game, so I had no choice but to use like the nuke.
Really, my only main gripe about it being that you can't achieve the secret ending if you have the Crusade auto mode on.
There you go. He just said what I just said like 2 minutes ago.
But even then, I think a lot of the Mythic Path endings are arguably a little better than the secret ending anyway. So the
bullshit. I called bullshit. I might as well say it now. If you pay attention to the story, and because with secret endings, you usually have to do like extra work. And with extra work, they kind of reward you with either more loot, which is not really the case, or like reward with lore and stuff. I prefer that because the antagonist of the game, spoiler alert, is the person on the cover art of the game, which is basically like the banner. The poster girl of the game is the main antagonist of the game. She's basically the mastermind of the entire thing. She opened the world wound, spoiler alert. So yeah, your job is to close it. And if you get into her backstory and everything, and her overall motivations and stuff, comparing that to like the other mythic endings, you're basically playing by the god's rule. But the secret ending and her overall goal is to basically ascend to godhood. You don't play by anyone's rules, which is honestly kind of good. Because if you really think about it this way, if you have like control over your own fate in like a world like filled with actual gods, why the hell would you wanna? If you had a choice to leave their sphere of influence, why wouldn't you? You'd have your own autonomy, your own authorization. Why would you not take that? It's just insane to me that we can live throughout in peace and harmony for like the next century or so before the dipshits do the same thing and the cycle just keeps repeating. It's like it's like Nirvana but bad. You know, with reincarnation and whatever, that's fine. But like, if you had a choice to ascend to godhood, who the hell wouldn't take that? Who would like? You have to be insane to not think about it. Like, after all that reward, all that effort for the secret ending, why the hell would you like take the 360? You or 180? You'd be insane. And I think it makes sense because like, you know, aside from what I just said, like overall, like you and your companions get rewarded for this. You guys actually should become gods, you know. And in some cases, some companions actually like basically tutor the next generation of heroes and stuff, which is good compared to like having zero agency or control over the future. Because you decide to just renounce godhood for no fucking reason and be like under the thumb of like the next generation of demons, which is probably gonna be more of a hassle if you consider like how magic advances alongside technology, exponentially speaking, like how now we have like deep seek and whatnot. Like Why the hell wouldn't you choose to have an edge? I mean, maybe it's more narratively satisfying because I already chose like the golden dragon path. Then we went to a secret ending, so maybe narratively speaking, it kind of jives well with like the mythic paths. But I'm thinking like long term. I'm not just caring about my character. I'm caring about the antagonist that also was like my mentor, kind of, sort of, and also my companions who actually like helped me carried my ass through the entire game. So it's like interesting, interesting.
There is that. But very broad strokes in terms of gameplay and world, I would say the main things I want to get across are that I love the way this game presents the Pathfinder universe, while at the same time, the emphasis they put on the mythic paths and how much the game reacts to your mythic path, which is why this game gets so much credit for how fun it is to play as the bad guy, or simply the class fantasy of being a lich and being able to raise people that you fought as your undead minions, or simply take revenge on them by forcing them to serve you in undeath. And this game
Basically.
captures those moments extremely well. But that brings us to combat, a bit of a sticking point for a lot of people on this one, thanks to the heavy use of the rule set that I've mentioned up to this point. And honestly, there's too much of individual things in order for me to go over combat in like a full sense. But again, I've made a lot of videos on the subject. But I think there's some good and some bad here. On the bright side, I think the ability to simply toggle between turn-based and real-time with pause at any time with the press of a single button is awesome. And while I have seen people just over the years with
Average bar fight in Moncton. That's literally how it looks like. Just magic spells being thrown everywhere. That's so funny. See this in real time.
RPGs say that they prefer a more curated approach to combat as opposed to just a lot of fights with enemies, but I would argue that Wrath of the Righteous has mostly curated encounters outside of the random events. While there is a lot of combat in this game, none of those enemies are randomly placed. You know where they are, especially if you've been there before. And the fact that you know mostly what type of enemies you're going to be facing, that is to say demons and the like, it's really not that big of a deal to prepare for them, at least to my mind. That said, what I do think is a fair complaint is that this system, simply by its very nature, requires a lot of proactive approach to combat. A lot of games these days especially prefer a reactive approach. That is to say, you go into combat and then everything you do from that point will contribute to your success or loss, in the sense that you can now utilize things like buffs or tactical movements to potentially succeed. Whereas with this rule set, especially if you're playing on anything above normal, reality is there's a lot of pre-buffing that has to go into it. And this is another area of quality of life that I'm kind of sad to see they didn't do anything with.
Yeah. If I compare this to another game, the most recent title, Rogue Trader, it's more reactive because you can actually buff on the fly. Because the enemy is pretty much doing the same thing. Whereas in this game, your opponents are so overwhelmingly powerful that you have no choice but to buff, like pre-buff, debuff, and summon. At least in my case, because I specialize in summons. You have to do this or you cannot progress through the game. Which is why, for a game about free choice, it's kind of like, man, you're really selling me on the Blur of the Illusion here, you know? Which is why, when you consider that this is going to be what it's like for most of the entire game, it's kind of like a slog to get through. Because your battles are predetermined by one single like option, which is just you have to buff no matter what. It's like my way or the highway, which is completely antithetical to the role playing experience in my book. Because at least in Baldur's Gate 3, you can at least play somewhat without killing people, from what I've seen. There's actual like freedom of choice, which is ironic given that there's so many mythic paths. But then it's like there's zero flexibility, which makes the illusion of choice even bigger and grandiose in scale. But I do like what they did with the Mythic Pass. It really sells on like, you know, your choices have consequences and whatnot, but overall it's still kind of based on the flaws I've mentioned earlier, I can't justify it getting above average and above average grade.
Especially since there's a mod that does this, where you can sort of stack up and initiate a sort of buff order where your character...
That's even worse, that you need buffs to fix it, which is really interesting. Because I don't include mods when it comes to my rankings. For example, Elder Scrolls. That game is like so fucking mid that everyone who doesn't play it with a mod or any mods of any kind is a psychopath. Why would you play it vanilla? What kind of psychopath would do that? If not for like the quality of life like stuff, like why would you play it like vanilla? It's broken. No one was like not broken in a good way, like funny hee hee way, but like just broken, broken. Whereas Bethesda's been relying on too much of their like mod fan base, and this is my theory at least. They generally thought they could have like a Hail Mary with Starfield. It's like, oh, let's have the fans do the work for us because we don't know what they want, which is unfortunate because if they've learned anything from Baldur's Gate 3, it would actually have some fucking common sense. But yeah, they've really had the comeuppance, especially ever since like they ruined my favorite franchise from them, Fallout and 76. I fucking hate them for that still. But yeah, it just goes to show marketing is very important for anything, any walk of aspect of my life, of anyone's life, really. And I'm still trying to get the hang of it.
Will cast all the spells you need to cast automatically, as buffing and preparing yourself for combat before you get into combat certainly can get tedious over the length of this game. And in order
Correct.
to do it effectively to begin with, you're going to need to know how the system works. And all of those things combined makes for a system that, again, just has a high barrier to entry for a lot of people. But what I really love about combat in this game is simply all of the ways to build a character and have fun with mixing and matching all of those mechanics. For instance, a lot of classes can get animal companions. Mounted combat is a thing in this game. They've even added new types of animal companions with a lot of the archetypes since launch. Like these days, there is an archetype very recently added that will give you a hippogriff. And combining those fun class options with the mythic paths and everything they're able to do just gives you so much in terms of how to approach any given combat situation that even these days, I never find myself bored with it. I'm constantly thinking of more fun ways to approach that and things I might like to try. But on the flip side of that, there are two things I want to mention. For starters, as you move up in difficulty, the less and less things that are viable, which means a lot of the things that I really enjoy about lower difficulties for this game, and that you can utilize all the crazy amount of combinations available to you to build a character with, become suddenly much less useful on unfair. And I think that's a real shame, especially when
Yeah.
you have CRPGs that present you all these options and then let you actually use them up to the end game. What's more,
Correct. Correct. Which is a huge issue with like high difficulties in the first place, which is like it's a fair trade-off to make because some builds are just unviable, even though you have like a plethora of choices, you know. It's just the name of the game. Some builds are just better than others, but like uh, it really just it really is just the tipping point for like overall freedom of choice when it comes to this game. It's too linear in my
though, is
didn't expect this. Okay. What the fuck happened there? Okay. The mic just died for a second. I apologize. I don't know what happened. Where was my yapping session going? Right. To put it very simply, at least in Baldur's Gate 3, there's like branching paths towards your choices, whereas in this game, you just stick to one path and it's like pretty much gonna play out the same way. There's no like variations and whatnot in between like those major choices. Yeah.
you all
Probably.
these options and then let you actually use them up to the end game. What's more, though, is you'll notice I never really mentioned the environment in all of that talk, and that's because it just doesn't really come up. For the most part, you're on a pretty much flat plane, and you're going to be fighting enemies who, outside of their abilities, there really just isn't much more going on to the battlefield.
Yeah, compared to Baldur's Gate 3, they actually use like a superior engine compared to Unity. Unity sucks ass. Go use Unreal Engine instead. But yeah, it just comes with the limitation of the engine that they're using, which is also an issue for most Bethesda games because they just don't want to innovate. They just keep using the same dog shit engine with the same problems, and they expect people to be okay with that after so long. A decade has passed since Skyrim came out, and they're using the same engine for the same game. Well, no, not the same. It's basically the same game, but like with different shades of like genre and splotches of paint. But still, you get the idea.
Traps exist, but they're really only there to annoy you. Positioning is technically important, but this game is so loose with its flanking bonuses, where basically any character standing next to each other next to an enemy counts as flanking, even if they're
Yep,
not actually on, say, the sides of an enemy, which I
pretty
would say
much.
dramatically reduces the importance of things like positioning or tactics, and a lot of that can, at the end of the day, feel like a simple number crunch as a result, which I would say takes away a bit from the otherwise really great combat system. If in the future of the Pathfinder series they were able to add some more dynamic elements and really bring the environment into it, I think that would be great. For instance, there are portions of this game where you're up on top of things, but no spell or anything I do is going to like knock an enemy off an edge or do anything dynamic. And as much as I love this game's combat, that's probably the one big fault I would give it, is that I do kind of miss just simple things like, say, an exploding barrel or something, as much of a trope as that would be, to really liven up what the actual environment is doing for you. Because in its current state, the only thing the environment really affects is any class with favored terrain. And even then, it's kind of just a small bonus, because even the concept of difficult terrain really doesn't come up much here, outside of like a spell or something causing difficult terrain. But
Yeah.
long story short, build variety and approaches to combat are pretty much unmatched, and unfortunately, the
Oh, that
environment.
was very unprofessional. Okay, I thought I had noise kit on. Okay, I guess not. But basically, I agree with what he said with the combat. If like it's honestly just down to an game engine limitation. They're using like Unity, which is like budget gaming, which is not to say it's a bad choice, but like if you want to, the industry standard now is like at least for AAA, this is a double A game. I know they're not comparable in the slightest, but you have Unreal Engine now, and like even then, it's like oh, you only get like costs into the mix when you've reached a certain amount of like percentage of revenue. But even then, there's options. You can't just stick to the same Unity engine for that long, unless you suffer the Bethesda curse. Yeah, I'm just worried about that for like Outcat's part. I don't want it to be another Bethesda, man. I really don't, especially with bugs and stuff, and like how the gaming industry incentivizes like making games unpolished before release. Granted, Baldur's Gate was like that to an extent, but they actually like have this thing called quality control. But yeah, it might be seeming as though that I'm simping for the game. But that's because I am. It's a masterpiece. I know I can change my mind. But yeah, I I wouldn't even be making this critique if I didn't care. So there's that. Right, combat. Yeah, it's too bare bones. You think for a role-playing game with tactics, there'd be actual tactics involved? Sure, flanking gives bonuses to like attack rolls to penetrate through AC, sorry, armor class, but like even then, it's not really like a huge bonus like you mentioned already. And there were these additional feats called teamwork feats. Now I've rarely used those because I keep swapping in and out between companions, especially for like their side quests. So I rarely use those. I just try to specialize them based on their build. And also like yeah, the combat. It unless if it's turn-based mode where you actually have to like position them properly and stuff. I wouldn't say that there's no strategy whatsoever, but if you know what you're doing, like simple stuff like bottlenecking, um, flanking, is also a viable option. And also like basic simple stuff like getting your tanks up front and like your spellcasters and like squishy boys at the back. Those things are, you know, for any basic like game in that genre, that's always going to be like standard norm unless like game designers are like sadists or something. But otherwise, yeah. Most of the time, it's just gonna look like this on screen.
Mental
Otherwise,
effects
like
or
this.
how any combat situation that is
It's just gonna be an average bar fight in like Britain or
just
something.
this place is extremely narrow and I have to make sure not to block my own path is really the only thing to keep in mind in terms of
Pathfinding.
the environment you're fighting in. And I think additions to that could really add a layer to this game, or future Pathfinder titles, I should say, that would really be something to see. But I think that's pretty much everything I have to say on combat specifically, which brings us to the DLC for this title. Now,
Oh
I
boy.
did make a video specifically talking about all the DLC and what to buy, because one of, I would say, the more noticeable absences of this game at the moment is an edition of the game that actually comes with all of the DLC. You can buy a version of it that comes with the first season of DLC, that is to say the first 3 of them, but then you'd have to buy the other 3 on their own. And while the game itself is pretty cheap these days, you can pick up the base game for $40, when you start throwing in all that DLC, suddenly it becomes a little more expensive. And while there's a lot of content there, I really do think this game could use a version of itself that comes with all of the DLC, now that it's all released, for even like $60 or whatever. I think that would be a great option to buy this one up, because as it stands, it's honestly a lot to know, which is a problem when you want someone to buy something from you. So let's talk about these 6 paid DLCs. So
Okay, let's just overall my experience. Without getting into it really deeply, I have all the DLCs. The problem is you can't tell which one's important to the main story because there's like 2 that are spin-offs, which is just already ass in and of itself. There's one that's the roguelike one, which is just extra bonus items, which I don't really need because I've been grinding the main story to the point where I kind of don't need them anymore. And then one is just literally right before the end game, which is just why? Like even like the additions to like the main games, like a few crumbs of dialogue, like Oliver Twist, like, "Sir, can you give me some more DLC content?" And aside from like the Citadel-esque DLC, A Dance with Masks, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. That was the best DLC by far. But like aside from that, and Old Break, those 2 are the only DLCs I would say that are worth getting for like additions to the main game. People criticize Fallout New Vegas for like splashing the freaking DLC once you exit Doc Mitchell's house at the beginning of the game, but like at least you know the options are there from the beginning. I don't want to have to like treat fucking installing the game as like getting groceries. Like, oh, this spice goes here. Oh, I need some extra soy sauce over there. Okay, let me get that real quick. Like, why? I'm playing a game, not like fucking cooking. I'm not cooking right now. Okay, let me cook, but like not like that.
a lot of them are standalone adventures. So,
Yep.
Inevitable Access takes place right before the last boss, but it's a separate adventure about your mythic power, basically. The actual game ends right as you achieve mythic rank 10, basically, which means you don't get a lot of time at full power. The Inevitable Access DLC is meant to deal with that problem by giving you a very specifically high level adventure. If you beat this one, you can get a ton of rewards for the base game if you want to replay it, but unless you're planning on replaying it, I don't think it adds a ton to the experience, so there's that. Now, my favorite one is Through the Ashes. This takes place alongside Act 1, where instead of the mythic commander, we play as just some regular nobodies, more or less, trying to survive in a city being invaded by demons. And there's a very scarcity of resources element to it that makes it a lot of fun for me personally because it's so different than the base game. That one also really doesn't add anything to the base game though, so unless you just want to play that standalone adventure, there's not much reason to do so unless you also want to play its follow-up adventure, which continues the story, called Lord of Nothing. Lord of Nothing actually is a little more mythical in nature, though, so even then it's very tonally different from the original DLC part of it there. And Lord of Nothing, when you complete it, can be imported into the main game, which lets your main commander take on a boss fight towards the end of the game that is honestly really cool, and can get you some cool rewards for the base game. Then there's Treasure of the Midnight Isles. This one and Last Sarkorians together, I think, make up the 2 most valuable pieces of DLC if you're just trying to buy them piecemeal, because Treasure of the Midnight Isles adds both a very large dungeon to the base game, but also a full-blown roguelite mode, which is incredibly useful for quickly testing and iterating on builds. It also has its own little story that somewhat relates to the main game and the main story even, and that's really nice to see. Now, I will say in the base game, Treasure of the Midnight Isles can kind of break the progression of the game because it adds
Because you can't spell Treasure of the Midnight Isles without mid.
a whole host of experience, loot, and drops that would otherwise not be available, and it can really mess with the overall power curve of what's going on in the base game, potentially making the game much easier as a result, which might not necessarily be a bad thing for some people. Now, the other really important one is the Last Sarkorians. This adds an entire companion class, and the companion has a whole host of quests, of course, to add to the base game that also take you to a new area that comes with its own side quests and stuff, so it's a lot of content there that also, as a result, kind of messes with the power curve of the base game, giving you a very strong character because the Shifter is a great class, and even more loot to go around. But the final one, A Dance of Masks, is more about sending off your companions. This one takes place pretty close to the end of the game, and it's meant to sort of mimic the off your companions. This one takes place pretty close to the end of the game, and it's meant to sort of mimic the concept of Mass Effect's Citadel DLC. Essentially a last hurrah with your companions, where you uncover a sort of plot, of course, at the same time, but it's relatively low stakes comparatively. And it's more about fun and adventures with the companions and friends you've made along the way. And what's really cool about this one is that this is very reactive to your choices up to that point, including, of course, the companions that are still alive, or the mythic path you chose, and it comes with, thanks to its proximity to the endgame, some extremely powerful items that I think is honestly a shame you don't get to use more of. So with that in mind, when it comes to DLC, I would say that Treasure of the Midnight Isles, The Last Sarkorians, and A Dance of Masks are like the core pieces of DLC that I think everybody's gonna want, and then the other three are much more situational. You might want to play them, but because they're all sort of separate standalone adventures, it's hard to recommend them on an individual level, which
yeah, I agree with him, except for maybe Treasure of the Midnight Isles, because it just makes the game easier, but then again, just like, in order, Ulbrich, no, that's not true. A Dance of Mask, Ulbrich, then slash Last Recordings, then Treasure of the Midnight Isles, in that order for me, DLC. The bottom three, one bottom three, there were only two DLCs.
is why an edition of this game that just comes with all of the DLC at a discount, I think would be welcomed by a lot of people, but as it stands, we haven't got one. And all of that brings me to the Steam Deck section of this game. Now, when I initially reviewed this game, it was before I was doing Steam Deck in my reviews, as it hadn't actually released yet. Now, initially, this game ran pretty well on the Steam Deck. It was very doable, but the main issues were that the game did not have native controller support. Now, since then, it does have native controller support because it released on console and they later added it to the PC version, of course. That alone makes this much more playable, but it's not without its faults at the same time. Now, the main issue I would say with playing this on Steam Deck, if you're comfortable with the controller support, is merely that a lot of the text is very, very small. This is a very text-heavy game, both in terms of the character menus and the actual narrative and dialogue, and all of that's gonna be honestly pretty hard to see, which I would say is my main hang-up about it. Now, just very generally, because of the genre of this game, I think playing it on a smaller handheld device like that could be less than ideal. Like, personally, I would rather just play this on PC because I think that's the format that it was clearly designed for. But like a lot of CRPGs, I think they've made a lot of good progress in porting this to other platforms.
Oh my god, imagine playing this on Steam Deck or console without mods. Oh my god. Those poor, poor orphans. Oh my goodness.
As well as controller layouts, etc. And while it's not exactly on the cutting edge of those transitions, they are there, and as a result, they make the game pretty playable on the Steam Deck. Probably going to tear through your battery, though, at any rate. Which brings me to my positives and negatives before we wrap this thing up. So, on the positive side of things, as before, the reactivity of this game based on your mythic paths, the characters you can build, all the replayability afforded from the mythic paths, and just the sheer scope of the game as well, are incredible if you enjoy this type of game. In fact, in terms of these isometric CRPGs, I think nothing really touches just the sheer amount of build variety and crunchiness that this game offers. And being able to make a character that is truly yours, for better or worse, while at the same time making choices, dealing with their consequences both in terms of the crusade and more direct situations as well is a really fantastic feeling, and all of that being set in the Pathfinder universe that I really enjoy is really just an added bonus. But obviously, there's still a bunch of negatives, and in much the same way, as with launch, we have that high barrier to entry that all of the updates and everything have really not done much to alleviate. If anything, I would say that's simply gotten worse as they've added more archetypes, more classes, more DLC, which the situation around is a little confusing in terms of buying it, which means that honestly, it's only gotten harder to onboard people to this game. Like, look at the sheer amount of content I've made for this and tell me that it's easy to just get somebody to play this without handing them story mode and a pre-made build. And I don't think that's an elegant solution to that problem, frankly. And some of that is certainly the system at play, sure, but trying to get into this game fully and explore what it's about is difficult. And while I think it's rewarding to do so, should you take it up, it's a lot to ask. And situations
That's why D&D Dungeons and Dragons, it has a good trade-off for now. It's more accessible, it's very easy to set up and stuff. It's not that difficult compared to this atrocious nightmare, which is the Pathfinder 1E, which is just, oh. If you don't know anything about D&D, that's why I even chose like fighter slash ranger multi-class, because like I know that I can be carried by the mythic paths of the game. They're pretty broken no matter what. So like it's kind of like your main class didn't matter, but it actually did. I'm pretty sure. Like I chose fighter because I wanted extra like movement and like attack. Extra attacks is really good, especially for like a dragon build. You're basically just doing kung fu on like most enemies if you don't want to use breath weapons, which is already OP in and of itself. Not to mention summoning dragons every once in a while. That's pretty cool. Yeah. But I guess if you want to ease into the Pathfinder universe, you should just if you want to ease into that kind of thing, like Pathfinder rules, just play D&D instead. Like it's a lot more accessible. It's easy, and if you really want more, you can try like other TTRPGs like Pathfinder and whatnot. I'm probably not gonna do that for a while. I need to like detox from this game until like Kingmaker. Kingmaker might change my opinion on things because like I know for a fact that it didn't change shit if it's like from the first edition. Which means I have to get a separate mod for like a specific class that I want because alignments and stuff. Oh, oh. Anyway,
outside of the game, like with the DLC, really only compound the issue, and it creates barriers between this game and the people who would like to play it, but honestly just get confused, rightfully so. What's more, though, even just beyond that, I think, especially in replaying this so many times, I would say that more dynamic elements would have been really fun, and in any future title, I hope they add them. In particular, though, there's the fourth act of the game, Alushanira. That city changes based on how you have the camera angled, and it's about the only time you really interact with the environment in any way that isn't simply performing a skill check and clicking on an icon. And when you try to do basically anything besides a pure sort of number crunchy approach to combat, you really start to notice it, especially with things like the stealth system. This game has a stealth system, if you weren't aware, but it's implemented in such a way that it's not really fun to engage with for most people.
Because you have to consider your companion's fucking stuff as well. Let's say if you want to like cross through these guys here, right? Only about me and like Wolfshift would be able to like sneak past them. The rest, if they have like really shit stealth, unless you like cast invisibility, you're screwed. So there's like no point because like most engagements are like unavoidable anyways. So what's the point?
I mean, technically you can abuse things like invisibility, etc. here and there, but that's honestly more trouble than it's worth in most cases, and a lot of cases, all you're doing by doing that is simply skipping a reward for combat. And all of that brings me to my conclusion. 3 years on, I would say that Wrath of the Righteous is obviously improved in a lot of ways. I think the DLCs and the updates have added a ton to the game. It's easier to play consistently. But all of those DLC and updates have basically just doubled down on what the game already was, which is to say, a fantastic game for building a character, approaching combat, the reactivity of mythic paths, and in doing so, they've also only honestly made it harder for new people to join. There's even more to choose from, even more to know. But if you're willing to push past that and get to what this game is really all about, I would argue that honestly no other game does it nearly as well. However, also 3 years on, I'm starting to look at this game and think about things I would like to see improved or iterated upon in any potential future release, and at the very top of that list, it's certainly more dynamic elements, again, to the environment or just combat in general, as well as more attempts to more directly onboard people to how things work, preferably in a manner that shows people rather than throws a wall of text at them. And luckily, if
Yep.
Owlcat's most recent game is anything to go by, I think they've heard those messages. As if you look at Rogue Trader, some of the things I've mentioned here have been at least partially addressed there. But to put it as simply as I can, this game is a tremendous RPG that has only gotten bigger and better over the years at the cost of becoming more and more confusing to newcomers trying to get into it. And while there are absolutely things I would like to see a game like this improve upon in the future, as of right now, this is my favorite game, as you well know if you watch the channel a lot. But as much as I enjoy this one, I honestly can't wait for the RPG that really blows this one out of the water, and I
Yep.
sincerely hope that game winds up being another Pathfinder title. But that is pretty much going to do it for this particular video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about this game all these years on if you happen.
And that's it. Shout out to Mortismo Gaming. If you really like this game, just go watch any of his videos. He has so many videos of this game. It's just I probably should have used it, but at that point, it's like it's not my gameplay. It's just not my style. Because I only use guides for like main quests and stuff. Otherwise, I would have been lost. But if you want to get into the nitty gritty of this game at a difficulty higher than normal, please check out Mortismo Gaming. Shout out to Mortismo Gaming. I'm just gonna, screw it. I'm gonna pay it forward. Let's just, yeah. Hold up. That's not me. Yep. Okay. I'm just gonna do this in case if anyone's interested. Just watch his stuff. He has like way more than just Wrath of the Righteous. Thank God. But yeah, there you go. Now, let me just set something up real quick. While you guys wait, we're gonna get into the companions. This was what? How many weeks ago?
What's going on, everybody? More
All right, 7 months ago. So how we're gonna do this is very
here
simple.
this time.
Okay, thanks, but okay. 7 months ago. We're gonna do this by I'm pretty sure it goes by worst in his opinion to best. So we're just gonna go through each companion by the books. So we're just gonna go through them by his order, I guess. So let me just find the thing real quick. Where is it? There you go. Just give me a second. All right. So we're at the next section of this goddamn retrospective, which is the companions. What kind of good role-playing game would not have good companions, right? I'd say overall, like, especially with the game, it's very hit or miss. The companions in this game, I know it's not gonna be like triple A gaming tier considering, voice acting budget limitations and all that, but still, at least in that sense, they're all in an equal playing field. Sometimes they get voice acting dialogue, sometimes they don't. And I have to like pretend I can hear the voices again. Like a goddamn schizophrenic. But yeah, but what do I know? I'm essentially a part cloud. I'm not like a medical professional. So here's how this is gonna work, alright? This is gonna be playing in the background by the way. Let me just lower it a little bit. That's fine. Okay. So where is it? Yeah, that's the one. So what we have here is relatively simple. Let me just yeah, let's just do that for now. What we have here is the shafted tier, which are basically characters I've never played alongside with. F tier, which is just shit. C tier is just mid. A tier is exceptional but not like super special, and S tier, which is like best of the best. Very simple stuff. So we're gonna go off of this video. What's his one gaming's video, which came out 7 months ago, which means he released the retrospective a month after that, which tracks. Yeah. Why did I click like half the screen? Okay. I did click half the screen. Just gonna leave it as is. Why not? I probably should have cropped it, but here we are. This is what I get for using the same screen twice. Yeah, let's do a little experiment. Hold on. If I just put them separately. Hold up. Okay. There we go. Confidential time. Also, those are spoilers, isn't it? Wait, what? Why is it? No, that's not the one. Why is it? Oh, hang on. That's the wrong screen. For some reason, I got the wrong screen for that. Interesting. Good to know. Wait, what? What's happening? Dude, mouse, not now. Oh, I'm so confused. All right. I don't get it. Why is it? There you go. Oh Jesus, I was like confused for a second. All right. Here you go. All right. Probably should have cropped that ages ago, but here we are.
Bringing you the companions from Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, Ranked. A revisit to a much older video I did back in the day that covered pretty much just the base companions for the game, and seeing how these days we had one added by DLC, and realistically I think it would be fair to add some of the ones added by various mythic paths, it felt like an appropriate time to go back and take a look at this and talk about which ones are my favorites and how some of that has changed a little bit over the last 3 years. So hopefully you'll find some enjoyment in it, but with no further ado, let's dive into this thing. So at the very bottom of the list, we have Trevor. Trevor is a somewhat hidden companion as he is Social's brother and can be recruited as part of Social's companion quests, basically. If you make the right choices, it's possible to recruit him. But the reason that he's at the bottom is because A, being recruited pretty late into the game, he doesn't have much to add to basically any situation, and even if he did, you'd probably never take him with you because his build is horrendous. Trevor had a very rough life, let's say. He didn't find himself in the depths of the abyss because things were going well, and his build, I imagine, is meant to reflect that. But it's a mess. You recruit him so late into the game that a lot of his build is set into stone as well, so you can't even try to multi-class your way out of it like you can with some of the other companions. It's just a bad time all around. Now, just a little bit up from him is Staunton Vane, which is our first...
Yep, there you go. That's why I also agree with Motismo Gaming. Trevor's the worst companion if you consider Just look at his class. Just look at his class for 5 seconds and you'll see why. 4 Armored Hulk, 3 Hell Knight, and 2 Paladin. You can't, like I said, you can't respec out of this too. I tried. It doesn't fucking work. I tried off stream. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. He's the worst companion because of this. I wholeheartedly agree. Which is why dude belongs in F tier. I wholeheartedly agree. It makes sense. Anyway, on to the Lich boys.
Time all around. Now, just a little bit up from him is Staunton Vane, which is our first Lich companion. So
it's interesting that the undead do not have constitution scores because they're already dead. Undead. I did not know this. Very interesting.
If you're unaware, the Lich Mythic Path is able to resurrect 5 different potential companions for your party that are only available to that Mythic Path. Now, broadly speaking, as far as companions go, I would say pretty much all of them are underwhelming. However, realistically, the Lich Mythic Path, and thus its companions, isn't really so much about the individual companions and the quality of that. It's more about the fantasy of being a Lich and raising these people from the dead to serve as your grave guards. And that collective idea is stronger than any one of these individual Lich companions. But at the bottom, we have Staunton. Staunton is a pretty tragic figure, I would say, that is responsible for the fall of Dresden, which was done at the hands of Minago, a Lalitu demon who kind of coaxed him into it. But while his story and subsequent raising into undeath is pretty fitting, his build is also pretty terrible. And unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of reactivity either. So you can resurrect him and then take him to go fight Minago, the woman who effectively did this to him, and he has nothing to say about it, and that's disappointing more so than his build, really. Just above him, however, we then have Kestoglir, one of your other potential Lich companions, and while this guy's build is better, he just has nothing going on otherwise. You can meet him.
Yeah, you can meet him in Act 4, I think. And then we beat the shit out of him. I thought we could at least talk about it, but once an undead, always an undead.
Him in Act 4, and to be honest, it felt like he was there mostly just to fill out the roster of the Lich companions in case you want to go fully undead party. And really the only saving grace and why he's slightly above Staunton is simply the fact that his build is actually pretty flexible in comparison to most of the others, as he's just a straight fighter, and thus through feats and things like that you can customize him to be what you want a fair bit, which can't really be said for a lot of others. But then we have Delamere, one of the early potential Lich companions, as you can find her right in Act 3 when you become a Lich, and then get the ability to actually raise grave guards. Delamere can be found in a temple, and she used to be a valiant crusader, specifically a archer of sorts, who served Erastil, and you can raise her into undeath, thus defiling her remains, and she hates you for it, but is nonetheless compelled to serve. But she's got a straight Slayer build, which is fantastic as far as melee DPS goes, and I like the idea of corrupting a follower of a god like Erastil in the name of the Lich companion, so I think that part feels pretty good for what it is. But then we have the 2 better Lich companions, and if you couldn't tell, they're all ranked pretty low purely because they don't have a lot of interactions and they're mostly there just to fulfill that fantasy. But the second best of those is, I believe it's Char or CR, I don't know exactly how to pronounce this dude's name, but I would say he's the best of these because A, he's actually a little difficult to recruit, period, as you have to do a side quest for him in a very particular way involving his son's death and how you are somewhat responsible for it, or at least the one who had to strike the killing blow to a person gone mad. And then you have to take credit for that in basically the most evil way possible before it's even possible to recruit this guy, so he's very easily missed even if you go like full on Lich. But realistically, just the act of recruiting him and the hoops you have to jump through to do that are fantastically evil. Like, you can just destroy this dude's entire life and then raise him to serve you an undeath to ruin that part too. It's deeply messed up, and because of that I think it fits the Lich very, very well. But also, he happens to be a Cavalier, which means he comes with a mount. And given that you don't get any Cavalier companions at all, other than this guy, which is only available in this mythic path, and the fact that Cavalier is really strong in mounted combat, he feels unique to play as far as these characters go, which puts him, I think, a cut above most of the other Lich companions, which means the very last one that we have to talk about is the Lich version of Queen Galfrey. So, light spoilers here, I imagine, but is what it is, I suppose. Basically, if you're following a path that ultimately sees Queen Galfrey dead, and you happen to be playing as a Lich, you can have her resurrected and forced to serve you in undeath. And while you might think that a paladin of Iomedae would be especially hateful about this situation, she isn't really. You can have an incredible conversation with her about this and how she doesn't actually feel as bad as you might think. In a lot of ways, she just feels relieved of the burden of carrying an entire nation on her shoulders and the responsibility of getting something like the world wound properly closed. And what's more, she also goes on to say herself that if anything, her being raised like this proved Iomedae really didn't care about her at all, as she would have stepped in and prevented it from happening otherwise. So now that she can focus purely on killing demons and nothing else, it lifted a certain weight off of her shoulders, even in death, which is honestly a bit harrowing as far as some of these conversations go. And because of that, I think the Lich version of Galfrey is a really great narrative moment. If anything, I wish it would have just happened a little sooner so you could have some of those conversations, because this is towards the end of the game, which is a very...
Did you say that she's a Bard Thundercaller this timeline? I wouldn't call her true calling because she's an undead, but like, goddamn, she got sucked up into a prune in the Lich path. Which is interesting. It does net her a few points though, which I'll explain later once you get to it, but holy... I mean, yeah, I'll get to more details later, but like, holy, like, does she need like a back massage after that? Like 100 years, a century carrying the freaking nation on her back? That's crazy.
Very similar situation for our next one, which is just regular old Queen Galfrey.
Okay.
She is available as a companion for essentially the last dungeon, if, and only if, you manage to successfully romance her, which is possible over the course of the game with Angel or Aeon, pretty much. And then I think...
And Golden Dragon.
Late game, you can actually switch over to Legend or Gold Dragon, but basically as long as
there you go. There you go.
Play a good aligned character, you can make this happen. And if that romance is successful, she'll join you for the last one. She's a level 20 paladin. Paladins are, for the most part, pretty great in this adventure path because we're only fighting demons like 90% of the time. And realistically, my only gripe about this is just that you have no time to do anything with this character, and while it can feel like a decent enough conclusion to that romance line, it offers nothing else. But now we get into what I would consider the sort of core cast of companions. These ones are more involved, they have more dialogue, they're with you for longer, and they're more interactive. So while a lot of the other companions we just went over are more gimmicks than anything else, these ones tend to be much more fleshed out. And
alright, I have to hard disagree, because, well, narratively, she does more than, like, you know, gameplay-wise. There's, like, no denying it, she's only available for, like, the last dungeon. There's no denying that. Even then, she's not really good. Even if you, especially if you auto-spec, but, like... In my humble opinion, she's... Let me check the list again. This is not because of bias or whatever, because I recruited her as a companion. She's definitely, like, at least... She's ping-ponging. Okay, I have to, like, consider other paths as well. I'd say A. I'd say A, and that's a pretty high regard. Imagine that you've been thrust upon a scenario as a noble where you basically have no choice but to become the front line, the poster girl of the crusade, and you've been losing or at least not regaining any progress or ground for about a century. On top of this, you have regretted immortality through like drinking some purple remedies. I'm pretty sure it's like orchis or something. And seeing like so many of like your attachments and like companions just die over the years. And especially to the romance path too, it kind of makes sense as to why she is like adverse to like any sort of intimacy because she's immortal. And then it doesn't really make sense if you're like on like an angel or golden path. But either way, the philosophy remains the same. The moment when you come into the story as like KC, like commander for short, it's like she has not gained a single ground for like the better part of a century, and she's considered the best of the best. And then you show in this like upstart just comes out of nowhere. Of course she'd be jealous. She has no ground, and suddenly this guy just pops out of nowhere. And then it's like I kind of had that feeling, like especially when she like boots your ass based on your choices and sends you to the abyss. Like she obviously did that out of jealousy. Like even like her right hand man Gabriel from Ultra Kill, the head of the Inheritor, the Herald was like, okay, dude, maybe this is a little bit much, like I get it, but like this is a bit much. That's how you know that she obviously did it out of pure spite and jealousy. But like this is where sympathy comes into play, especially for a lot of these companions that rank higher on the list. It's because gameplay wise, she's basically like Sela, but narratively speaking, she's such a pivotal role, even though she's not really involved. Especially if you like go on the romance path, which is what I did, and it's my fucking tier list, so screw you. It makes sense. It's like, especially for like immortal characters in general, I kind of like that because they have like a lot more experience over decades behind their belt, and especially with characters, companions, and whatever in any sort of like medium, like fiction, non-fiction, you can basically tell what they're like the moment they respond to things. I think great characters come from great reactions, or based on how they react to things. It's one thing for them to like be ho ho ha ha funny, but like how they respond to certain stimuli and all that, certain choices when they're really pushed to the brink, that really shows true character. And that goes with life as well. She has sympathetic motivations, and she could have very easily been one note, but like she is to an extent. But I'm also factoring like the lich part, which is like when you romance her, it's like she like straight up tells you at the end of the game, like, I don't want to be queen anymore. I just want to Romeo and Juliet just run off to the sunset, which is like, okay, cool, sure, I guess, but like, I own an entire kingdom, right? So either way, you just kind of be like, at best you're gonna be my right hand man again, which is like less burden off the shoulders, which is fine. But like, the moment she becomes an undead, it's like, oh gosh, I get that she wants to vent and have catharsis, but that's not the way, fam. That's just not the way. I get that, what kind of life doesn't have burden, if you really think about it, There's no such thing as a burdenless existence. And unfortunately in her case, she's a noble, and she's like basically the poster girl of the entire crusade for like about a better half of a century. Like, yeah, of course you'd have back pains. Like, come on, you're like a plus 100 and over. And I like how there's like one dialogue where if you like explicitly state her age, she gets pissed off and just ends the conversation. That's so funny. That's so fucking funny. Oh yeah, and even in the DLC, I was like, how the hell are they going to implement this character who's like a hidden companion? She actually shows up at the end too, at the final boss battle of the DLC, which is like, oh, that's nice. And even with like the thing before the final battle of the game, it's like, you really get into why she doesn't give a shit about the duty. She's just doing it because she just doesn't want to get hurt again. It's very obvious. You live that long, it's like, damn, how many losses can you take before, you go insane? Honestly, I just think her whole nobility and like, oh, sticking to righteousness and whatever, Wrath of the Righteous, get it? The whole spiel about, honor and whatnot, it's just a coping mechanism. I'm not a psychologist by any means, it's just a theory of mine. And I prefer it to like, it makes sense. People cope. The way the methods and solutions in which they cope is like, it's up to the individual. But obviously, Galfrey's a lot more nuanced than people give her for. Even with like the whole tanking your entire crusade thing, which I didn't really care about in the first place. Like, who cares? You just kill off a bunch of troops, but like, I have toy box. You guys don't. You guys just prefer to be sadists or masochists or whatever. Which is why I think she firmly deserves to be an A tier, but meanwhile this guy can just go get therapy, man. Your build sucks. Anyway, it sucks that she isn't more involved, but like considering her role and everything, and even with the 1 month timer bullshit in Act 3 where you have to wait a literal in-game month for her to show up, and if not, like certain things just don't progress the way they do. Eh. What comes around goes around in the end, you know? So overall, I'd say she's a pretty good character. She's an above average character. Way better than your, like, damsel in distress, Princess Peach type kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with his choice. Wait, I agree with his placement, but I agree with, like, why he would say this. Gameplay wise, I think about when I'm doing this list of companions, I'm considering both gameplay and narrative wise, and some lore. I guess it's like kind of like the lore is basically the glue to the bonds that are the gameplay and overall like character. There you go.
At the very bottom of that list, we have Lan. Now,
oh, that's so based. Okay, before he continues, I fucking hate Lan. His voice acting is like when he mentioned that the voice acting is hit or miss, they were not fucking kidding. Lan's voice, I get he's supposed to be like the heroic good guy compared to his other companion Wendua, which we'll get in a second. I could not stand his fucking voice. It is like those memes of like, no disrespect to the voice actor, but like holy shit, what was the direction that they gave them? It reminds me of those like, you know how in especially with Japanese games because of localization, that's already bad in and of itself, jelly donut as like, you see an onigiri on screen and they say, oh, look at this jelly donut. It's like, it's even more compounded with the misinterpretations and misunderstandings with like, I mean, even back then, like, it's gone better, obviously, because the industry's been booming, but back then, in the 90s and especially the 90s, oh, the voice acting quality is so bad. Like, you have, like, Blue Yeti mics, like, peaking, just, like, stuff being heard in the background, like the fan and whatever, like, background audio. Is like, his voice acting. Okay, you know what? Let's do a little experiment. I'm going to keep him, because I haven't really fully explored his story, so I can't really give him anything within grounds of like S, A, C, or F, because B is just bullshit tier, and D as well. It's just like you compromising. It's like the 7 out of 10 of ratings, They're either good, mid, or shit. There's no in between. But the reason why I'm placing Lan in the shafted tier is because I haven't really like placed like Quest because I got him killed over Wenduag. Because Wenduag, I'll get to Wenduag's case, but like Lan's character in Act 1 especially reminds me of this character from Fallout New Vegas, this DLC called Daniel, who is like, oh, the obvious pacifist, but his ideology is so flawed because it's the apocalypse. If you become a pacifist, you die. It's do or die. You either live or you die. Like, we're lucky because in our world right now, pacifism is an option because we have like systems and like laws in place, right? So obviously that's fine. But like in a dog world situation in an apocalypse, like why the hell would you like make? You're not only deciding for one person, you're deciding for like an entire tribe, and that's where the similarities lie between Daniel and like top hat looking motherfucker and Lan. They're essentially choosing the fate of their own people through one opinion. That is very bad, especially when a war is happening on the horizon. That's like, you don't get to decide unless if you're like a dictator or something. Okay, I'm gonna do a little thought experiment here. Just give me a sec. Okay, let's compare Lan's voice acting with like peak anime voice acting, alright? Or just anime game voice acting, okay? Because like the moment the character starts to speak, it's like it reminds me of this like infamous like dub, this infamous game dub. So you may think I'm overreacting, but Jesus Christ, this is one of the first companions in the game. It reminds me of like Pinocchio. You know which Pinocchio? Okay, shut the music off for a second. Shut the ops for a second. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. There's more than one Lan. Okay, I want to do a little thought experiment, but like if you know like the voice acting like fiascos and how bad some can really get, like for example not matching the tone or just straight up being bored or like playing it completely straight, that you're not even acting in the first place. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna play 2 clips, alright? Let's play a little thought experiment. I don't care if I get cancelled for this because who the hell's a fan of Lan from Wrath of the Righteous? I genuinely don't know. I just don't understand. I don't okay. Maybe the story's interesting, but I don't know. Like I just can't get behind Lan. I can see why people choose like what is obviously the evil option, which is the alternative, but we're trying to find okay, companion chair. There's got to be voice here, so I'm probably not gonna play this here, but let's see. This was from 3 years ago. Of course, it tracks out. This game came out in 2021.
Mongrel Lan, reporting for duty. Have you ever met a mongrel before? Let me be your guide to our little underground habitat, the glorious Neathhome. We eke out an...
Oh my god. I can't. Oh my god. It's worse in the trailer too. It's this exact same deadpan monotone. Oh my god. Okay.
existence in the caves under Canabres, never seeing the sun. Our lifespans are short, and our food supplies are even shorter. Our bodies are twisted and deformed.
It's the same cadence, tone. Oh my god, it's the same as the fucking bass drum.
Now, some people may think, ew, but have they ever tasted a fried rat with a side of moss sauce?
When I think of Lan's voice acting, I think of like my friend who is like extremely stoned and like trying to read script, but it's like squinting his eyes while reading it as though English is not his first language. That's literally the same like energy I get from Lan's voice acting.
Or my favorite, spider cakes. People...
Even that delivery. What was that delivery? I get that he's not supposed to be human, but like with one dog it's like haha evil, but like cackling, scheming evil. But this is just dude bro that's stoned and not in a good way because it's like so immersion breaking to me. Thanks, Lan. You are awesome, Lan. Okay, I'm not gonna like.
often say that
I'm not doing the thing where I read comments saying like, "Go be a snipe dickhead." Let's just hear what he has to say for the next minute.
it's what's on the inside that counts. Well, this is my chance to prove it. Lan, the goat lizard human with a heart of gold, is...
I don't remember him being this jacked. They probably debuffed him because they realized that via the JoJo fandom, twinks are more edible than meat cakes. Okay.
Here to watch your back. I know I'm not the prettiest boy in town, but if you need a steady arm and a keen eye, I'm your man. My arrows pierce my targets at a distance. Enemies pay with pain for each step they take toward me. They might think I'm weak. They might expect me to stumble and retreat like most archers do when attacked in melee. But if the enemy thinks they've got me cornered, they're in for a surprise.
Oh god, it's muted. It's fucking muted. Hold up. It's muted. Okay, the joke is ruined. Okay.
Father, tell me, when can I leave to be on my own?
I've trained my body in the ways of
Okay, I know what the issue is. I'm a bit harsh on the voice acting here, but it sounds as though as he's speaking, he's trying to do a Squidward impression by pinching his nose and sounding like this. But it's like, oh my god, it's just a personal gripe. I just don't like the voice acting of this character, and like switching to Wendoa, especially with his like where his mindset is at the current outset, where we're fighting a war. We don't really have a choice if we don't attack or attack because we have to defend. Otherwise, they're just gonna kill us. They're literal fucking demons. What do you want me to do here?
I can take a punch, endure the pain, and then return the favor tenfold.
It sounds as though this is not his first language.
Father, tell me, when can I leave to be on my own? I've got the whole world to see. I want to meet other people.
Choose me for your party, and watch me turn demons into porcupines as I stick them with a swarm of arrows.
Great choice. Great choice of wording. But if I were an employer of like adventurers and I saw this fucking videotape, I would crush it, fling it as hard as I can, like a homing tracking arrow, and hit Len in the head. Because if this guy shows up in my party, well, I mean, he's a really good. From what I've seen, I did cheat a little of Toy Box, so he's actually a pretty viable character. But like otherwise, he's just. What is the direction of this? I want to know. What? Yeah, okay. You can tell that it's like 50-50. It's really 50-50 here. Like, for me especially, it's just hit or miss, I guess. To each their own, but like, I get this was a Kickstarter project, but like, come on. Like, I can say out of all the companions, Len is easily like the weakest link when it comes to voice acting, which kind of makes it so that whenever they have like the picture storybook thing and like tons of dialogue to read, it's kind of like a saving grace when it comes to Len, I guess. Oh my goodness. Uh, okay, I just want to see this one for Galfrey, otherwise just move on. Trevor, absolutely not. There's no way he's a hidden companion. Absolutely no fucking way. Game of the Year edition. What a sick joke. Oh my god. Oh, they even have like the CapCut subtitles for Baphomet. It's so funny. Oh, okay, yeah. Alright.
Father, tell me, when can I leave to be on my own?
I can't. Okay, if you like pitch shift his voice like one octave down, that's lag. That's literally all that I think of. But enough bashing. Let's just move on for our lives. So what they have to
Lan
say.
and Winduag are some of the first characters you'll meet, and for some reason, Lan is incredibly annoying to me. And
Correct. It's not for some reason. His voice direction is like this on purpose. On purpose. It's not like some divine accident from God. This was actually like rehearsed, voiced, and like sanctioned and okay by the studio. No disrespect. Because if you're going for like a weirdo, that's fine, but like that's supposed to be the good guy, and you're supposed to convince me that this is like, oh, this is like a cool path. But no, this makes me hate him even more.
he just never quite made up for it, and it's not helped by the fact that you have to choose him or Winduag for
Need I say more?
the bulk of the game. It is possible to recruit both of them later, but it takes some work. And
Yep.
honestly, Winduag is just a much more interesting companion, even if
Correct.
she's evil. Lan,
Correct.
on the other hand, is your more standard do-good type that is honestly a bit naive. In the future, he thinks he can carve out for the mongrels, and he's a character that just never quite landed right for me, so I can see why people enjoy him, but I'm simply not a huge fan. Worth a mention, though, that his default build is actually pretty good. Just above him, however, we then have Grey Boar, and much
Okay, this is a hard fucking disagree. Greyboar, if there's one Greyboar fan, it is me. The fact that the DLC makes fun of him having no fans when he actually does is peak writing, because it's just lampshading. That's why I kind of like, DLCs that like touch upon like before the final battles, like this Calm Before the Storm. It actually makes you like interact with your companions more. And honestly, because of that DLC, some people's rankings, especially towards the companions, have like gone up and some have gone down because of that goddamn DLC alone. Let's see. Does Greyboar have his own thing? I'm pretty sure like the beginning characters have like trailers. I just want to see if like others do as well. Okay, I guess not. Certain characters do, certain characters don't. Yeah, so I'm thinking. Right. All right, explain yourself, Mortimal Gaming. More like more abysmal gaming. Why is Greyboar so this low on the list? Why?
as his name would imply, the guy is a bore. A real personality vacuum, to be
Yes.
honest. I think his companion quest really hard carries a lot of what he has going on. He has some
Mhm.
interesting stuff in the Abyss section of the game, and then his final quest can play out in a few different ways, potentially leading to a betrayal, assuming you even got him recruited properly in the first place, as he is a hired assassin after all, and you have to pay up. And his quest is really interesting, even if him as a person, not so much. But he is also a Slayer, which again is just a fun class I enjoy playing, so everything besides his personality isn't so bad. Now, just above him, we have Sosi.
That's it? You're not gonna explain? Okay, fine. I get it. He's a hired assassin. He's muted. most assassins, like cliche wise, they're supposed to be boring. There's no like hesitation. It kind of reminds me of like Taro Sakamoto from Sakamoto days, where he's kind of bland, but like there's actual nuance if you like bother to pay attention. Where I would rank him personally, I'm not even lying when I say this. He's top three. I'm not fucking kidding. He's actually an S tier character for me. I thought the same thing as Mortismo as well until there's a section in I think it was Act 3 or 4 where you actually get into like a nightmare sequence or dream sequence where you get to see everyone else's like inner thoughts and stuff. His inner thought, or like I guess it was his death state, but either way, it's like a dream thing. He actually has. He's not a virgin. He's a family man. And when I saw him training his daughter, I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna set up like some sort of like tragedy or something. Why is he so like you know cold and distant all the time? Maybe the daughter it was a botched like assassin job or something. But no, he chose to leave his family behind because like he actually has like the hindsight of knowing that, oh, maybe this life isn't meant for my family. I don't I want to have a family, but at the same time the assassin life loves me more. So he made the less mature choice of like just leaving to get the milk and cigarettes. But at the same time, it's kind of like, damn, I generally thought he'd be more one note, but then you realize like the interactions he has with other companions, Chameleon especially, we'll get to that. Like the way he treats Ember especially shows that he has a soft side. And it doesn't help that he sounds like he literally looks like David Hayter, Solid Snake voice. Even his voice sounds like.
Colonel, I'm trying to sneak around, but I'm dummy thick, and the clap of my ass cheeks keeps alerting the guards.
I call him misunderstood. I think I was just yapping and I just let them. Okay, I just forgot the mic was muted. But basically, Quavo's a good character because he's a lot less one-dimensional than people make him out to be. He treats Ember well, which is good. He has a goddamn soul. Gameplay wise, he's really interesting to play, and his quest is good. Like what Tismal said, like it's very easy to treat this guy as a one-note character, but like the fact that he had a daughter, but unfortunately left to go get the milk and cigarettes is like, oh, there's some nuance there. And then like he's unironically a very good assassin because he knows the weaknesses of most of his enemies through his dialogue as well. It's more implicitly stated that he basically has been around. He basically knows like how to deal with any monster type basically, and that shows through gameplay as well. Because the Slayer class just like target, lowers their defenses, kill. That's it. That's his playstyle, and I fucking love that a lot. He's basically like an assassin from Assassin's Creed, but he's a dwarf, which adds like appeal to me because you wouldn't think of like the dwarf race being that of an assassin. It doesn't really fit with their stocky build, but like it just works. And if there's one Grey Boar stand, it's me. And also, it doesn't help that he looks like David Hayter and he sounds like fucking Solid Snake. So that's why he's like top 3 in my book. I can't believe I muted my fucking mic. When did I do that? When do I? Okay, anyway.
So Seal is appointed as an advisor to you right at the start of Act 2, and he is a cleric, which is desperately needed for your party at that point in time. And as a full divine caster, clerics can do a great many things for you, which means just from a class standpoint, he's a great addition, but personality-wise, leaves a little bit to be desired. Now, he does have a fair bit of content. He is a cleric of Shaylin, to be specific, and she's the deity of art, beauty, love, things like that. And Social is struggling with those things a bit. He goes to a funeral of his friends only to see them be desecrated by a necromancer. He finds out that his brother faltered in the face of the crusades against the demons, and you have to deal with that as well. So he's got a lot of very interesting quests, even if he as a person can be a little bit boring, but a bit of a sensitive soul, if anything. Now, just above him, we have a slight...
Okay, I agree with most of his points. However, he is Socio specifically top 5. Top 5. He's just a bit below Galfrey, simply because he is what I would call a 3-dimensional character. His, stuff with his brother can actually like vary depending on what you say to him. I obviously went the more sympathetic route, so like, he went through all this, he must be a badass, when clearly his brother must be suffering. So I obviously wasn't like a fucking sociopath and said, haha, your brother must be strong to like endure all this bullshit for so long. I was like, no man, that was pretty fucked up, you know? And yeah, he's a great addition. His cleric gameplay wise is fucking amazing, especially with summons and stuff. But like, clerics can be very one note, but like in his case, there was like a side quest where he was like addicted to gambling because he was obviously coping with like shit because he has to deal with people. He's like the group therapist out of all of like these like psychopaths and like murderers and stuff. This guy's like the only like straight man of the group, and it's interesting that he has managed to dole out this much punishment verbally and physically for so long that honestly I don't blame him for gambling. But then obviously telling him to stop was probably the right choice. He was like basically searching for his brother, the stress of the war. And he does painting in his free time. That's pretty cool. He was also more of a side thing. But like that scene in Act 4 when he reunites with his brother, convinces him to join the light side thanks to your intervention, and like just beats the shit out of demons. Yeah, that clears him out for top 10 easily. I wish he did that more when I control him though, but like otherwise. Oh yeah, there's also a scene in the DLC, spoiler alert, that actually like made him like stay in top 5. He loses to Godfrey a little bit because experience outranks anything. But also, there's this point where they were playing dice together and Greybor fucking cheated. And Socio was so mad he flipped the fucking table and assaulted a legendary assassin. That's pretty fucking based. Like, hands on hands, Socio loses every single time. But the fact he was so pissed off enough to even attempt this, balls of steel. He's definitely the best man at the wedding. 100%. Also, like, he's literally the group therapist. That's really nice. He also has like a vineyard in one of the endings. If you don't go Ascension. That's really cool. Let me check if there's like a sociopath sociopath ending. Sociopath trailer for him. No. Okay. But yeah. Hard to disagree on this one.
Slightly more interesting companion, but admittedly kind of like a half companion, and that is Finian the Talking Weapon.
Okay, I can't even believe these guys even consider a fucking companion. He can't even use him to fight, and he's a bound weapon. So half the time, and like his stats are kind of like shit when I use them, and he's pretty much outclassed. And his companion quest doesn't really add anything, except for like being the Morgana of the group. F tier. He's F tier. I nothing's gonna change my mind about this.
As part of Wolgift's recruitment quest, you can find Finian in a shop and pick him up and take him with you. As the name would imply, he is a weapon that can transform into basically any weapon you have proficiency with, which means that he can fill the gaps for whatever weird weapon your specific build might require.
That's it. That's all he can do. Like even then, the best I can get for let's say a fighter is a great sword. Two-handed weapon. It's like fucking easy, right? But like the fact that he has no other like abilities beyond his companion quest, even like they don't have like any new bonuses or whatever. And the fact that he's not even like a true companion is kind of like, why? Because he's a Pathfinder? What do they do? Do they go pathfinding? I know what happens. I know what Pathfinders are. They're basically like the good guys that explore and stuff, but like the fact that this is the first Pathfinder that you find, if you haven't played Kingmaker, it's kind of like, oh, what a great first impression. So you're telling me they're noobs because one of them got turned into a weapon. Very cool.
In fact, in many cases, because of his upgrade path that happens over the course of the game, he might very well be the best option for you. But definitely so if you need something that happens over the course of the game, he might very well be the best option for you. But definitely so if you need something weird like an S-stock or a dueling sword more than likely. But the interesting thing about Finian isn't so much his useful role in the party, but rather what he is. He's a living weapon. How did that happen? Where did that come from? What would he like to do about it? Because he seems oblivious to the fact that he is a weapon.
Denial.
And there's this whole little interesting side plot that centers around that and how he came to be. And it's a really fun little narrative, even if he himself kind of lacks a, let's say, corporeal form outside of a sword. Roughly halfway through, though, we then have Dayran. Now, Dayran is...
Yeah, that's it. The moment you meet his master, who is basically a psychopathic dwarf that like imbues souls into weapons, his name is Dwarf. I'm pretty fucking sure his name is just Dwarf. What a great companion quest that was. Especially if you have the DLCs on, he basically gets outclassed no matter what. I can't justify why is he here but Ulbrich isn't. That boggles my fucking mind. Okay, hang on. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I need to like double check something. Hold on. Because this was definitely made before Ulbrich was a thing. I'm just yapping for 2 hours straight. It's worth it. Just to detox the bullshit. Ulbrich is in none of these. That is actually insane. That's actually insane. It's not even here. Okay, this is spoilers one. We're gonna move on to that one if it has Ulbrich in it. Because I have words. Ulbrich is not on this list. Oh, so fucking mad. Why is Ulbrich not on this list? He's not on any list. I'm actually freaking upset. They did my boy Ulbrich so dirty. He's unironically OP. We'll get to that in a bit, but let me just do some like spring cleaning. He's not actually there. Holy shit. Okay. I have to like actually manually add him. Alright. Alright. Ulbrich Olesk. Okay. He's right here. Molesk. We'll add his thing when it happens, but like otherwise, when it happens, right? Darren definitely has a trailer. He's too charismatic for his own goddamn good. And it's ironic because I rarely use him. I know he's good. I know he's a good bard. I like bards in D&D and whatever. But like, bruh, you know, he's kind of fucking, he's a dickhead. You'll see what I mean.
is simultaneously very interesting and very, very annoying. Now, he
Yeah, that's
is
the whole
kind
point.
of your sort of anti-hero type. He's a very off-putting individual, somewhat by design when you get into his personal quest. And more
Right.
often than not, he's just very grating on a person. But his quest is super cool. He's an oracle. It turns out that he made a deal of some kind with something called the Outsider. And there's a pretty cool quest involved in that that also has a bunch of different endings depending on how much respect or rapport you've managed to build up with the guy, which in my case is a challenge to do because I find him so grating. And I kind of find that interplay interesting, even if his character isn't exactly my taste. But then we have Regil, our resident...
Alright, so I agree. He is basically a noble, a cleric, and basically Coop Godfrey's cousin. So, family matters, right? But overall, I say as a character, he's pretty freaking mid. Like, I get it. His dialogue, his verbal comebacks are pretty good, but like that doesn't patch up the fact that he's a fucking narcissist and an evil dickhead. Like you have to like really suck up to him in order to like keep him as a companion, which is already that. And it's not even all that as a freaking bard too, because like he's a really good support, but it's the problem is that he doesn't really specialize to anything, in my opinion, especially if you keep his like Oracle class. And the fact that he's attached to this spirit thing for so long is a bit of a hedonist. I remember Mandalore Gaming said that he basically got into like magic just to heal accidents from like S&M type stuff, which I have not seen from any dialogue that is mentioned. So maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But either way, that's not going to be a huge factor unless if I clarify it. But either way, yeah, he's pretty mid. He kind of reminds me of Asterion with like the whole high nobility shit. This pompous, posh dickhead that actually gets around to you after a while. But except that Asterion has baggage versus Darren's just a trust fund baby. A very funny trust fund baby, but a trust fund baby nonetheless. So he's kind of mid in my book. There's no pathos, there's no like struggle, except for the fact that he has like a demon that doesn't really inconvenience him in any way. Yeah, not much I can say. There's a lot of like Darren fans because of his personality. Honestly, the DLC made me warm up to him even more, just to get like a gauge of his personality. But because it's so one note, it's like he's a sleazeball, but like not the worst sleazeball in the universe when compared to the rest on the list. Reggio, on the other hand,
Gnome Hell Knight, who simply by being a Hell Knight is hastening his own death as a gnome because they are subject to what is called the bleaching, which means if they don't subject themselves to chaotic lives, they die a lot faster. But that's how much being lawful means to Regil, which is obviously a very defining character trait, so much so in the fact that he doesn't even really have a personal quest. His quests are more about testing you as a commander and setting up the Hell Knights to properly work with you. So that, combined with his heavy involvement in the actual crusade side of things and like councils and whatnot, he's a very interesting companion from that standpoint, and he grows on you after a while, especially if you're not playing a mythic path that is directly opposed to the guy. But what's more, his build is actually, I believe, the only one that uses a prestige class by default, which is the Hell Knight, which makes him interesting as well, and even his default build is pretty solid. So I like having him around for a few different reasons, but these other ones a little more so. Next up we have
yeah, Reggio, in my opinion, is just above Darren slightly, but not by a lot. I would give him A, but like he's definitely above average in terms of C. He's a gnome commander nightman. Like gnomes are okay, dwarves are pretty short, but gnomes are like the shortest of the short. And like his introductory sequence, the ones where he just straight up euthanizes like those injured in battle. It's like you kind of get a person his you kind of like get a gauge of his personality. Strict no nonsense guy, really Batman contagion. Sorry, contagiously platty. He's by the books. He's so by the books that he's even willing to take L's on his like own reputation because it furthers the crusade, especially if you go along like let's say his companion quest, when they accuse you of like treason, and then it's like, oh, actually no, we're gonna step back from that. Actually, you're a pretty cool guy, and obviously there's a scapegoat for that. And Rachel's like, fine, because I'm so honorable and like steadfast in my beliefs, I'll take the L because I know that I'm right in the end. That kind of thing. He's no nonsense for sure, but like the DLC really makes you warm up to him when he's like upping security. Like he's like the true embodiment of lawful evil. I'll post mention this because and I wholeheartedly agree. He's like the real embodiment of lawful evil. Yeah, he does some pretty fucked up things, but he's not doing it for fun. He's doing it for pragmatic reasons because they're in war. Hell Knights aren't like they're basically specialized crusaders, but like they're basically like the special operations unit of the crusade. They're like just more like willing to do what needs to be done. Yeah. And honestly, I would have placed him at A, but then he did not. I heard a lot of hype about this character because, like, it's funny. A gnome Hell Knight is like such a weird premise, like dwarf assassin. But like, yeah, I guess that really caught my perception of him when I actually got to meet him. Because like Grey was like obviously superior in terms of like default build, and I was like, he's fine. But like, gnomes and dwarves have the same movement speed, which is 20, and like the average human is like 30. So obviously, like his reach is worse. And I get that as a character, you can like bounce that off with like enlarged spells, make them bigger, give them teleportation, cloaks and stuff, which is what I did with Grave War. which is perfect. But like, aside from that, yeah, it's kind of like mid. I'm sorry, Retro's mid. All this spiel about, oh, you're not weak, they are not weak. It's a skill issue. You are the skill issue. You know. Yeah, he's just pretty. At best, he's two-dimensional. At worst, he's just against you if you're like a lich or something. Because he's basically like the party downer of the group. He doesn't even get drunk. He just even in, like at the end of the DLC, the Citadel DLC, he just stands there in the corner. It's like you should get some sleep, my commander. Too much alcohol is bad for your health. He just stands at the corner like a creep while the others just playing dice. That's crazy. I get he's trying to be a night watchman all the time, considering what happened at the prologue. It makes sense, but like, come on, man. We take shifts. You know that by now. You know. Anyway,
Woljif. Woljif is another one of the first companions
Woljif.
you'll pick up. You have to
It's
spring him
Woljif,
from
actually,
prison,
but
only for
whatever.
him to turn around and ask you for help in dealing with a problem with his little thieves guild, where it turns out he absolutely did the thing they're accusing him of doing, but, of course we're lying about it. So Woljif is a rapscallion, a scoundrel, an eldritch scoundrel to be specific, and that can be fun. And what's more, he's one of the companions that can actually be good or evil at the end of it. You have a lot of influence over his character and his quest line. His quest line itself is really interesting, as he has some sort of bizarre heritage as a tiefling that sees his shadow doing more than a shadow should, let's say, which is also really cool. My only gripe about Woljif is that he never really aspires to more that isn't just easily handed to him, even if you sort of push him in that route. He's got a very set in stone way of looking at the world that, while you can keep him from cavorting with demons, is not something that feels like it really changes, and I guess that's what I don't care too much for about when it comes to Woljif. He does have a potentially very good build via Eldritch Scoundrel, which is a fun one to mess around with, so there is that. Now right above him we have
Okay, I also kind of agree here. He's right below Darren. If I'm being honest, here's a hot take. I genuinely think Darren plus Woljif equals Asterion. Because Asterion is just basically these two characters, but done in one person. And it's done so much better too. I know that Asterion doesn't have magic, but like you can make him an arcane trickster, which is like, why wouldn't you do that? It's like the best rogue subclass in the entire game because it has magic. Why wouldn't you take that? Why? But at the same time, it's like, it's true what he said about Woljif. You can either convince him to be good or bad, but like, yeah, he doesn't have any higher aspirations from that. Even in the DLC, he's just trying to swindle people. And that's fine. It's fine to have simplicity in characters, but like, he's just that. Darren and Woljif are kind of similar, which makes sense as to why they like buddy up with each other in the end. They're both scoundrels, but like they get one another. They're like made for one another, like a positive and negative parts of the battery, or like Sam and Max. They're both degenerates in their own way. Sneaky gremlin motherfucker, gremlin goblin people, just doing their own thing. And honestly, like they're both also like bound by like spirits, so that's pretty much why they're like band of brothers. They relate to each other a lot more, which also nets them together. So overall, they're kind of mid. Woljif is cool, but like he's really mid in my book. Let me double check something. I cannot believe they made Lan a freaking poster boy for the companion trailer. Oh, there he is. Okay, let's just watch Woljif's thingy. Let's see how Alka introduces this cycle.
Psst, over here. Hey, Commander, listen. I'll make you the deal of a lifetime. Take me with you, and we'll make a fortune together. I can sneak under a guard's nose to the places no one's supposed to enter, but everyone wants to go. I can fight. While you distract the enemy from the front, I attack from behind, striking where it hurts. I know, I'm incredible, right? But that's not all. I dabble in magic as well. Need some lightning to fry your enemies, or a decent protection spell? Look no further. Need to fence some items or get your hands on some goods that aren't strictly legal? All you gotta do is say the word. See how useful I am? Wouldn't I be an asset to any operation? So what's it matter if I'm a thief who's currently locked up behind bars? Life's hard in Canabras, and twice as hard for a tiefling. To have demon blood running through your veins and to live in a city built on the edge of the world wound? Now that's what I call a cruel twist of fate. People already hate me just for being what I am. So one day I decided that they might as well hate me for what I do too. So I
Damn.
joined the Thieflings, a tiefling-only organization of robbers, thieves, and other fine ladies and gents forced to play the miserable hand they've been dealt. How did I end up in jail? Oh, it's quite the tale of betrayal and rotten luck. Release me, and I'll tell you all about it. And then I'll travel with you to your journey's end. You have my very honest word on it.
He looks like Timothy Chalamet, but like his younger brother. Also, that was a really good intro to the Rogue Scoundrel. Like, you can tell the difference between him and like Lan. It's night and fucking day. Like, I think even Mandalore Gaming mentioned this. Shout out to Mandalore Gaming. But when you hear his voice acting, you can tell he's smiling the entire time, and that's really fucking good. Yep. Like what makes a really good companion in my book is that if I feel like it's not obligated, if I want to like have drinks with them, I would share like drinks with them if I think they're really good companions. If they compel me to want to have drinks with them and have like, you know, deep thoughts and like a podcast tier level of like a conversation, they're good fucking companions, which is why I rank them so highly or lowly depending.
Olbrig. Olbrig is the DLC companion. He was added by the last Sarkorians, and he has a fantastic build with his Griffin Heart Shifter, which is only available to him, which makes him quite unique in that regard. And his Griffin form has unique abilities that nobody else can really do, which obviously brings unique things to the battlefield and makes playing him pretty much always worth your time. He himself, however, was trapped in stone for a long while and is the last Sarkorians, as it were, because he is from Old Sarkoris, which is what the land of the World Wound was before it was torn to pieces and named the World Wound as a rift into the Abyss. So he's really interesting from that perspective because he has a lot to add from those things, and then learning about his backstory, about why he was trapped as a statue for so long, what happened to him before that, where his memories went, is all really fun. And because he's a DLC companion, that's coupled with a lot more new content than basically any other companion gets, as his companion quests tend to lead to other more involved side quests at the same time over the course of the game, which is also pretty cool. But then we have Arushale.
Okay. Ulbrig is a very great DLC companion. He's strong, he's funny, he's a dude bro, but like he's below Social because he's more one-dimensional compared to Social, and I prefer more dimensions when it comes to my characters. If I were to place him on the tier list, he would be right beside Social, so let me just do that real quick. I know this is going to be a hassle to do, but I don't really mind. It's worth it because he's like a DLC character. So it's kind of appropriate that he's an add-on. Right about here. He'll be here. Yeah, he'll be right there. Top 10, that's for damn sure. But yeah, when you get through his like quest, like, you know, he's like the last of his line, so that already makes him like interesting. The last Griffin man. Because they're pretty fucking broken. If you went up against 6 Griffins as demons, I can see why they decided to just slaughter them straight out before they became a threat. But you know, when he meets like his new descendants, I'm pretty sure there's some descendants, I kind of blanked out when it came to his story, but yeah. Overall, it's like DLC, his quest and stuff. Very good. Very good additions to the game. But like the part where he turns out to be a deity, half deity, and like he had to fight his twin brother, holy shit, that fight was ass cheeks, especially when I didn't like spec Olbrig properly. That fight was cheeks. I had to like summon the nuke. Here's one of the fights in the game. I think it's one of the tougher fights in the game. Honestly, top 5 toughest fights in the game, 100%. Like, man, I've heard of like older brother like bullies like the younger sibling, but that was just a complete dog walk. Unfortunate that I have this thing called Noob, so didn't really matter.
An anime character as far as I'm concerned, but honestly a pretty cool one. So Arushale is a succubus who would like to revert back to being mortal more or less, and is trying to redeem herself, which is a theme of this game in more ways than you might initially realize. But Arushale had a brush with the goddess Desna, the goddess of dreams, and they made a sort of pact where Desna is very much so trying to allow a rue chalet the room she needs to truly redeem herself in a sort of reverse fallen angel situation, because while fallen angels are a very common trope, the reverse, in a sort of cosmic sense, should definitely be possible, but rarely happens, and so getting that perspective from this character is also great. But because she's a succubus, her stats are also insane, which is unfortunate then that her build is an espionage expert, which kinda sucks. The fact that she's not a demon slayer is blasphemy. But also, if you romance her, she has a quest where she literally puts herself in horny jail, which is beyond funny to me. Now, just above her, we have Sela.
Yeah, but like putting Sela above her is fucking insanity. I still have to put her like, yeah, above Godfrey. Now I'm thinking, what the hell did I just romance her then? Well, first of all, she's chaste, which is like, but she literally goes to horny prison on her own volition if you romance her, which is like, what? But also because she's like a fish out of water character, a la, Starfire and whatnot, which is like, okay, fine. But then it becomes like the only source of her humor. I like the fact where it's more subtle, where she actually just spies on people just to like get clue on what social situations are. It doesn't really help that in her DLC quests, just like you initiating conversations. So it's like, oh, it just really caters to the introvert crowd. Like, oh, I have a friend who can help me initiate conversations, so I can just jump in. Oh, I'm shy, Yeah, I can see why Mortisma will call like an anime character. She would be an S if like there was more like nuance. She was in an abusive relationship, but then it's like whatever. She doesn't really like stand on her own unless you like intervene, which is like whatever. There's also like she's also technically a hidden companion because you can actually like make her worse. You can make her better, but you can also make her worse, which already nets some points down because she's not even like that. And like, how they even work? Because she turns into a mortal, so I guess she's like a mutant, kind of mutant humanoid. So I guess you can make maybe, but like, how would that even work? Would they have wings? Would they have like demon horns, or is it just a regular human? That's why it's kind of like there's too many variables, and I think Gelf is a simple option, and I like her overall better. But like, as a companion, she's actually like there most of the time. Espionage expert isn't good, but like for what it is, it does well in normal. I can see why it can be really terrible at higher difficulties, but she does what she does. And it kind of ties back to the whole redemption thing. That's really good. And also it kind of reminds me of the situation of why I like Mass Effect 1 over like throughout the entire trilogy. I prefer Mass Effect 1 the best because it was like BioWare at its best before fucking EA. And also, I get it. Mass Effect 2's ending really has good variations, but like if you just use common sense, then it's like you can basically save half the team. And if you actually put in the work for your companions and stuff. But why I prefer Mass Effect 1 the best is because you have a set of companions based off of like races and cultures that are like, oh, they have like this set of rules, but then they're like complete outliers. They're complete misfits. You have the blue aliens who are known for being horny and charismatic, and like your companion is literally a book fucking nerd. Rex, who's supposed to be like this indomitable killing machine, actually has like, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. And Tali, who's like, a gadgeteer, but it's just like spunky with it. They're all like, and Garrus, who is like kind of like a dude bro, despite being supposedly being a no nonsense like police cop. They're all like special because they have these weird contradictions. And Arusha is like the prime example of that. I can see why people in the waifu wars appreciate her more because it caters to that fucking demographic. It's so predictable. But like, she has like cute moments where like, with Ember and stuff and like any other NPC, because she's just generally a good cinnamon roll. But like, she's not the best cinnamon roll because, you know, we haven't gone to her yet. Not yet. And no, it's not Sela. It's not fucking Sela.
Sela is the iconic character for this Pathfinder adventure, which means that she is a class representative of paladins. Every class has an iconic, as they're called in the Pathfinder world, and Sela is this one, so she's like a very specific character in the Pathfinder lore. As such, she is our paladin, of course, and paladins are pretty good in this setting by default, just because of what they are, and her quest is a little more traditional. However, to add some conflict to it, in this particular setting, paladins are lawful good, or at least in this version of the game, I should say. With that in mind, Seela verges a bit more on the side of good than lawful. If anything, she's a little prone to chaotic choices, which is a bit of an odd touch, and it creates some tension here and there in her quests and about her faith and what she believes in that makes her a little more interesting than I would say most others. And honestly, just the fact that she is a fully fleshed out character before being brought to this game shows, as she has a bit more of a defined personality than a lot of the others can. However, with that in mind, my gripe about Seela is more that she's just a little unreactive to a lot of things, and while she can leave your party eventually, it takes a very long time to get there that I don't think would be acceptable for an actual paladin, which can be a little frustrating at times. Now, bringing it up to the top 5.
Okay, that's insane that she's top 6 despite all this, because while her companion quest is traditional, but at least some variety with it, you know, it's all about execution and whatnot. I genuinely think she's like above Trevor but below everyone else. I think she's F tier. I have reasons why. Number one is that she's really neutered by the fact that there's no consequences for her chaotic actions. She's supposed to stay lawfully neutral. Not lawful good, but then some of her actions are kind of dubious as fuck. Like what he just said about how if you conduct certain mythic paths, it takes a long time for her to like change course and be like, hey, this is a really fucking bad idea. And also, I get why people don't like to play paladins because they're like strictly tied to their god and like do good boyish and shit. But then you realize there's this thing called war paladins, ancient paladins, paladins that have broken their oaths. So it's kind of like they're set along a predetermined path, but the choices that led them there, you know, that's what makes up the nuance for me and why I love the paladin class overall when it comes to like Pathfinder or D&D or whatever. Like my guy's supposed to be a paladin, but then he broke his oath. But then it's like, and that's a whole other kind of worms for another time. But like, what else? Yeah, the fact that their powers basically are tied to a god, and once you like break your oath, that's it. You lose your powers. Unlike Warlock, where if you break your oath, you still have your powers, which is like, come on, man, fuck you. That's like cheating. But like, you know, paladins, I did not expect them to be completely neuter compared to D&D. So how D&D it works is that in D&D you have this ability called Divine Smite. You hit something, boom, extra attack, Divine Smite. But then in this game, it's more like it pretty much encompasses the whole philosophy behind Pathfinder First Edition overall. It's called Smite Evil. You point at the guy you want to smite, and then you deal extra damage from there, which is kind of like it's not really as like you know compared to like boom, light up, Divine Smite. This is more like Smite Evil than hit. It really shows like the difference in philosophy in terms of like spectacle and like gameplay mechanics. Which is why I think Seela could have been so much more. Imagine if there was like an Oathbreaker, she like really went too chaotic. Like let's say with the wedding, for example, she like does a more dubious choice. Maybe she kills out of self-defense. Then it's like boom, Oathbreaker comes in, and it's like, oh shit, we actually get to like get more like stuff with the paladin and not make her like synonymous with Godfrey. But nope. It's just goody two shoes time. Especially in her DLC too. It's just she's too, and the fact that she's not romanceable too is just like the camel on the straw's back for me. Not to me, but for some people, they really want to romance tomboys for some reason. But hey, some people are into that. Go for it. You know, just, just, just go for it. I'm not gonna judge. All right, people like what they want. Pretty sure that's a Seela trailer, 100%. Let's see what she has to say about in her defense. Nothing. Awesome. She's supposed to be the iconic character, and somehow she's the most boring. No offense.
We then have Ninio. Ninio would be higher if her quest wasn't awful. It's my
Correct.
least favorite quest in the game because
Correct.
it is a puzzle dungeon. And
Correct.
I've done it like once or twice, and I hate it so much. But I do love her as a character. Initially, I found her really grating, but Ninio, over the course of the game, I would say has some of the funniest lines for reasons that are explained in her quest if you can be bothered to do it. She has a very, let's say, poor amount of socialization, asking all sorts of just wildly inappropriate questions and to anyone at any time, including demon lords and whatnot, and it's just very funny. Couple that with the fact that she is a scroll savant wizard specializing in illusion magic, and you can do a lot of fun stuff with that. I made a build specifically for Ninio, which just instantly kills stuff, including a bunch of bosses with things like Phantasmal Killer or Weird, and it's a ton of fun. So she's funny. I really enjoy the build that I can put on her. I use it pretty much every run at this point. I just wish her quest was a little better. But that brings us to number 4, which is...
I actually agree. However, she's a bit lower on the list. She's basically at right above Rachel. She's just barely edging at A tier. Quest aside, oh boy. I guess I can just put, who in between. Just like shove them in between. Okay. Quest aside, right? The fact that she's a Kitsune really took me by surprise because when I was watching through like other people's gameplays through Twitch and whatnot, I was like, who the fuck is this? Did you just mod this character? And I realized, oh, this was a character back thing. So some fun facts about this game. This was made through Kickstarter and I have milestones, which in turn led to the chaotic hellhole quest that was Blackwater. And it also made like a vote for a companion at the time, which was Nanio. I think one of them was either romanceable or like turn her into an animal furry thing, which was like, and obviously they chose the furry thing because of course they do. And she became a Kitsune, which is like, oh, that's pretty interesting. It really bumps up the intrigue and really makes you want to go into the puzzle. I mean, her quest a little bit more just to find out what the hell's her deal because for someone who's so smart, she has like the worst short-term memory imaginable. She's like a goldfish. She's basically like Taskmaster, where Taskmaster can basically learn anything on the fly, but like has the worst short-term memory because of it. It's like a really cool side effect, but like especially throughout like the end of the puzzle, if you bother to do that at all, that fucking sucked. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, not even my worst enemy. If she conquers her actual demons with some help, like, oh, it turns out you're like this living embodiment of so and so. That's why you forget about things. You're like and then she gets like really throughout the like majority of the game, especially if she's in your party, she's like not to say jovial but blunt in her like assessment. She's like, "Aha, Abigail Shapiro. Actually, hypothetically speaking, that kind of ideal, but like it's endearing after a while because it just pisses off the opponents. It just makes our companions just weirded out in general. But to see her really despondent at the end, it's like, God damn, she's actually having an existential crisis. She's basically like at that moment in time when I got to that scene in her companion quest, she reminds me of certain characters like Rick Sanchez or like Chopu Tupaki from Everything Everywhere All at Once, where she's really dealing with like some existential shit, and it's like with some nudging, she obviously gets out of it, but like compared to like the antithesis, which we'll get into in a bit, I'd say she's an overall really good character. Like she's definitely exceptional for sure. If she wasn't a Kitsune, she'd be in C. I'm just saying. I'm not a furry. I'm not a furry, but you know. Also, Lola Bunny just came out on like Multiverses when the game is about to die. I find that really fucking funny. Just saying, I find that hilarious. Oh man, this retrospective is so all over the place, but like, this has taken up 60 hours of my life. I want to like get some recoup, okay? It's called doubling down. You kids will get it when you're older.
Is Camellia. Camellia is not so subtly an evil character. It's hinted at pretty much from the moment you meet her, before being outright explained in Act 3. So, slight spoilers ahead for her personal quest. Camellia here is a serial killer. She is just murdering people for the love of the game. She has an amulet to hide her alignment, which is chaotic evil, and she belongs in the abyss more than just about anybody else you meet. And her quests, as a result of that, are wild, honestly. It is some truly messed up stuff at times, but honestly, I think you need that in a game where you're talking about how depraved demons are supposed to be, but also people that, wind up there. How do they get to that point? She's a perfect example of that. From her upbringing to where she is now, she's a irredeemably evil person, and the game really leans into that. So much so that having her around on anything but an evil playthrough seems ridiculous, which is a bummer because she's one of the best lockpickers you can get. But What I don't like about her, and why she wouldn't be a little farther up, is simply that the game really jumps through hoops to keep you from killing her. and it's probably because she has some really good quests, but it's to the point where it doesn't even make sense. Like, as an angel or an Aeon who's all about law, you can totally just overlook everything she's doing and be like, that's fine. And there's essentially no consequences for doing so, which is just bizarre to me. But then we crack the top 3 first with Wind.
Okay, I can't believe he just ends it off here. I genuinely think this is a very hot take. Not really, because I saw the meme. I was really ashamed that I didn't really catch on before the reveal in Act 3, which is here. That I knew she was a bit weird, you know? Like, why would you hide your alignment if you have nothing to hide, right? That's a bit weird. Everyone else in the game has, like, their alignments stated. Even the fucking assassin just tells you outright he's just true neutral. Why would you hide the fucking thing on purpose? And you can't even, like, unequip the necklace. So I kind of, like, and even her excuse for killing people, like, if that were the case, why didn't that show up the moment we met? And that's when I was like, okay, she's fucking bluffing. But then I just wanted to see where it went. And that's when I really think that, to the game's detriment, with like the whole no voice acting and some reading, it's kind of like going through a visual novel where they were speaking and then suddenly they just stop talking. And it makes it even more eerie because you genuinely don't know what they're thinking. And like, you just fill in like the horror behind. I guess good horror really comes to the imagination. Like, people are afraid of the dark because they can't really imagine what's going on. But then if you imagine it, it's kind of like otherworldly and scary, you know? That's why I kind of like horror manga and books rather than horror things, which is like Blumhouse Productions, fucking suckers. Because the mind is really weird. Like, it's supposed to protect you, but at the same time, it just comes up with these like weird contingencies in your head, like, oh, if imagine this showed up, it's like, ooh, you know, it just exaggerates things. It's kind of like anxiety in a way. It just like it leaves things up to the imagination, and it's up to you whether if you want to be like consumed by it or like actually conquer it. Which is why I kind of think this is like, out of all the companions, Camellia actually like excels in the whole budgetary issue thing with like having voice acting sometimes and not having it. Holy shit! When she actually like complied with my request to, okay, stop fucking killing people in Act 3, I knew for a fact she was gonna fucking like go behind her back on that. And not to mention the fucking shit she did in the abyss. Like, she was about to like kill like a doppelganger of her father. And I was like, oh fuck, she's done. And by Act 5, that's when I realized she's about to kill her own dad. And it's like, okay. And then like right after I genuinely thought I convinced her to step out of it. And then like she's like, fuck it, we're gonna kill the servants instead. It's like, no. And then she's like really pissed off. And then I basically had to kill her in self-defense in the game. And I get no XP from that. And if you actually do comply to kill the servants, she just outright tells you and gives you the necklace. By the way, the whole shaman hunter thing, the spirit thing, I lied. I knew that from the beginning, but like the execution, it was so harrowing. Like Camelia's story could unironically be like an entire movie. It can be an actual psychological thriller. That's why I think she's like the best companion out of everyone in the game. She's just like a walking, talking, fucking um horror movie villain. Like, that's insane. That's insane. She's top one, 100%. There's no going back from this. It's like, Jesus Christ. Like, I'm all for having like irredeemable people, but like in a world with demons, you have to be really fucked up to be like evil, evil. Like, just evil, evil, evil. I can't even believe. You know what's even better? I don't think she was even being subtle with her being a serial killer. Ember and the Neo, both like intelligence and wisdom maxers, immediately catch on to the fact she's a fucking serial killer. But then the rest is like, okay, come on. Based on her interactions, you know something's off, right? It's even more damning that either A, they basically knew she was a serial killer and were just forced into compliance to just not say anything because of like rank of hierarchy, or B, they knew and were just fucking with me the entire time. I'm probably overthinking it because, you know, the game isn't that dynamic, but still. That is insane. That's insane. And like the fucking thing taunts you for even like keeping her around, like, haha, she planned this from the start and she gambled correctly. Like, fuck you, dude. I don't get XP from killing her. I get XP from like helping out her out with a companion quest. And that's why I didn't even touch her in like the fucking Dance of Mass DLC. She deserves to die in a pit. She is for the streets. She is for the streets. She sucks. But like, goddamn, there's a reason why people love Camellia. We love and hate Camellia. That's insane. Like, if she were in Arushale's shoes, she'd be unstoppable. Thank fuck that's not the case. If if these two right here, Urushule and you know who, if these two's, if Urushule and Camille's places were switched, the world would be fucked. It's just killer incarnate. It's over, you know? So it all evens out in the end, you know? There's some good sides, there's some bad sides. Oh, man. Like, I get it. In hindsight, it makes sense. But then, like, it isn't really that. I mean, it's to my detriment because I wasn't really paying attention. I was half paying attention because I was streaming the game. And, like, I was like, haha, you know, funny, huh? She's just, like, awkward, you know? She's like, I genuinely thought that her noble facade of her being a dickhead and stuff was because, you know, they're entitled dickhead nobles, but then I realized that's the plot of American Psycho. That's some, like, American Psycho type shit. Oh, God. There's crazy, and then there's, like, Camellia. I can't even imagine romancing this fucking hag. I don't even. Wow. Imagine romancing her without knowing she's a serial killer. That's insane. Oh my god. S tier. Like, there's no fucking way. She's definitely top five. Just because that. It's interesting because, like, in terms of serial killers comparing to demons, like, obviously the demons are the worst ones, but, like, it makes you feel bad because Camellia is in your party from the beginning. And I don't think it would have been that much of a large impact if she wasn't there from the start. And on top of this, she's actually pretty fucking useful for any party, which is like, damn. But yeah, the justifications also come in with like gameplay. Like, you can't, if you kill her, you gain nothing. If you like comply, you get XP. So it's like, fuck it, fine, we'll keep you around. And I was just so curious as to what will happen if you just keep her around to the ending. Because like in like any other path, the original Golden Dragon ending, she basically becomes a serial hired assassin, like Greymore, where he would just retire because like I'm a good person like that. But at least she can be bought, which is fine. The problem is she's only into like innocent people, which is like I don't even know if that's a lie, but like she's just gonna kill no matter what, I guess. What a deceptive cunt. Worse than Azula by 100 times. And the only comeuppance she gets, which is why I prefer the secret ending in the Ascension ending, she basically gets so bored of killing things because like there's no stakes for her anymore. It's the thrill that really gets to her, which really shows her as a character, you know. And she just wanders off and fucks off, which she just hates her godhood because like nothing's challenging anymore. What a fitting end for a despicable fucking creature. S tier. Don't tell me that she hasn't got that trailer. That was insane. If she does, holy shit, that would have been crazy. Okay, yeah.
Duag. Land's counterpart and
Winduag.
much more interesting character, we have everybody's
Base.
favorite cat spider, who is all about survival and trying to raise her people to be more than, simple mutated creatures living in the dark. Now, to do this, she's willing to do basically anything, including serving demons or whoever's stronger, frankly, until she can learn to take that power for herself. Definitely an evil companion, but between her quests as well as her overall narrative arc, especially if you choose to romance her, she's a tremendous character and has, I think, one of the best progressions over the course of the game from where she starts to where she goes and where she wants to be. And it's cool to see that play out, especially when it gets down to her actual emotions. And her build can be taken in a lot of ways, as she just has a level 1 fighter thing you gotta play around with, and other than that, you're pretty much good to go, so there's a lot you can do with her. But she defaults to an archer. Second on the list, we then have...
Okay. I kind of hard disagree. Wenduag, okay. This is because of hindsight. So she can only turn around to be I can fix her if you romance her. The fact that you can't really like do a 180 on her character without romancing her is kind of like a detriment. She's just above Siwa, in my opinion. I'm sorry, but it's true. It's just unfortunate that that's the case because, oh man, I really love Wenduag Cat Spider, but like she's just, I think I have to like put her just barely above F, like the top of F tier because her whole promise about using the mongrels and then like something like flavor characters of the army in the end, and then she's just like conniving snake. She even betrays you at the end, Act 5 if you don't do a companion quest. And even then, if you just leave her to her own devices, she just becomes a warlord and just dies no matter what anyway. She's just that power hungry to a fault. Now this would happen if she just stayed by my side, but like it happens. And her advances too are fucking creepy. It's just like so insistent on doing the deed, like, bruh, no. It's like if there's one thing that both sexes really hate is like fear and desperation. She had both in her eyes, and I did not like that at all. Some people are into that. I'm not. I prefer a more mutual, healthier relationship, not whatever the fuck Wendell's cooking in the kitchen right now. I don't even know if she can cook, which is just bad. So yeah, I'm pretty sure if you take the land instead, she basically becomes good, and they even get romance. I'm pretty sure between Lance and Wendell, that was fucking weird. I don't think that's an actual thing. If it is, oh my fucking god, all the more reason why she deserves an F tier. But yeah, she's like I get why people love her as a character, but like the progression is like it's great if you romance her, because there's no way to like actually reform the mongrels as a race completely unless you like romance her and become king of the mongrels or whatever stupid shit. Game of Thrones fucking dog shit. Freeform fuck. Who cares? It's fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't rank her this lowly. I wouldn't rank her this lowly if I didn't care. I still don't care about her anyway. So, what a piece of shit of a character. Literally and like physically, like even her build is like kind of ass. Unless you like spec, but like I didn't want to spec for my first drop because I wanted them as them, you know, as their preset, minus my character, because that's them. I didn't want to respec them because that's literally them. So yeah.
Ivu, the Havoc Dragon from the Azada Mythic Path that you can get, and
I did play
Ivu
Azada,
is a
so.
wonderful character. A child dragon, enhanced by your mythic powers to grow bigger beyond what she would normally be. She's a great bit of, I would say, comic relief at times, always eating everything and getting into it. And when she gets kidnapped in Act 4 as part of that mythic path, there's a tremendous fight that you can go deal with in a slave market for the Abyss that really exemplifies the difference between chaotic evil and chaotic good when it comes to concepts like freedom. And Ivu's always at the center of that, but also she's just an incredibly strong companion. As a Havoc Dragon, she's got a fear aura that you can toggle on. Once you get a few mythic paths under your belt, she has not only a breath weapon that keeps getting stronger, but also like almost an entire list of cleric spells she can drop, like Resurrection, for instance, which makes her a tremendous party member that doesn't even count against your party limit, which is a huge blast to play around with. But also, she's a dragon, so that's something. But then we have number one. And to explain why Ember is my number one character, we have to talk a little.
I wholeheartedly agree. I want to hear his thoughts first on Ember before we move on.
Little bit about things that are also some light spoilers, but basically Ember is an elf that was burned at the stake, but managed to be not killed by this. She was kind of freed during the middle of it, so while horribly burned, she's okay, and she wanders the streets as a beggar, basically convincing people that the only people they really need to believe in is themselves more so than gods. And if you embrace that and you push her to keep doing it, she can convince even Nocticula to change her ways, which is a really fantastic story. But, and what people may not be aware of, is the fact that that's actually a reference to the real adventure path. You see, if you fully do Ember's quest, Nocticula, one of the demon lords, will fully repent and rise to godhood as the Redeemer Queen, which was something.
Okay, that actually happened canonically, but then for some reason, I think it's because I chose the demon path, that didn't manage to register because I did bring Ember to Nauticula, but then she just left it off because I was a fucking demon too. So maybe that has something to do with like not her Nauticula not becoming the Redeemer Queen. I was so pissed off when it happened, but at the same time, the Ascension ending wasn't supposed to happen. It's not canon. The Angel path was, spoiler alert, because it's more accurate to the actual adventure module, what actually happened, blah, 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 blah. It's my story, so fuck you. But either way, What a cinnamon roll. She's the best cinnamon roll in the entire game. Sure, she's like canonically taller than my character, but like, goddamn. The loli has spoken her truth.
That was kind of already in progress, and is the canonical outcome for her in the adventure path as part of her cult of the Redeemer Queen. And Ember is a single character that sort of represents that change, but also, as such, is one of the characters that really exemplifies the concepts of redemption across this entire narrative arc. And while that's really fun, it also helps that her blaster caster build, that her default build sets up, is outrageously strong if you pour some items on top of it that increase things like fire damage, as well as also setting her up to be your healer, so she can perform both a healer and blaster caster role, which makes her an extremely valuable party member. In fact, on my original Iron Man playthrough of the game, I used her to one-shot a boss for like 1400 damage, I think it was. It was a really fantastic critical moment on stream, just to drive home how powerful she can be with her default build. But a great build, a great character, and a great story is easily why Ember reigns supreme here for me. But that is pretty much going to do it for all of...
Okay. Yeah, I agree. She basically gets defeated only by Camellia because of, like, variation in the story and whatnot. She's basically above Greyboard. Like, there's no fucking contest. So yeah, this is the list. Okay, so Ember is an atheist in a world with gods, and she makes her own like cult. And then when she actually like achieves the secret ending and achieves ascension and godhood, she actually realized that divinity is actually kind of bad. I mean, like, it's actually hard to manage. So it's kind of like, oh, I was an atheist, but then now with this responsibility, I kind of like, whatever. I'm an atheist, but then now I'm just gonna like, if I can help better people then as a god, then why not? It's pretty cool, like, character arc. Also because her interactions with everyone is just wow. Especially with Camellia, it's just children have the really good advantage of just saying the truths, as saying shit as they are, and especially in like a war-torn scenario, it really helps when people are just like lying and fucking deceiving you all the time. So it's nice to have like a simple, straightforward cinnamon roll that destroys everything in its path. Makes sense. And obviously she's not romanceable for obvious reasons. Need I say more? Like, come on. That's like, you do not need me to explain why. You sickos. Whoever mods that in, you're a sicko. But like, yeah, this is the definitive list for me. Finian should not even be on this list. Ulbrich deserves to be in on this list more than fucking Finian. He sucks. But like, not as much as Trevor. Because, okay, no, that's not true, because Finian doesn't even work as a companion. He's just a pseudo companion. But yeah, Ember is like, yeah, she's actually like the true embodiment of like the themes of this game, redemption, and particularly becoming the Redeemer Queen. But then she does it in my module because I'm a fucking demon at that point in time, and it's just laughs her ass off at her. And I guess like the only rare exceptions where you can make Ember sad is when you go evil, or like just be a dickhead. Like, why? She's like used. It's kind of like weird because like the only reason why I didn't fully replace her for Camilla is because I just didn't want her to be hurt by war anymore. She already lost her dad. Like, she doesn't need any more suffering. In fact, if I had to choose one person to sacrifice at the stake, Fallout 3 ending style, Camilla is going in that fucking pit 100% of the time, no exceptions. Just zero. Redeemer Queen is crazy. It's a shame that the Secret Ascension ending isn't like the canonical ending because you have to like, work your ass off just to get that ending. And it ties into like, spoiler, a really Vorlesh's like whole motivation of like not being under the influence of gods. Like, bro, imagine if like you had no say in your fate or agency whatsoever. It's like dictated by gods, especially unless you like choose to do so under like warlocks and clerics. But to keep it short, uh but overall, I think the game is mid. There's a lot of things I can say, but I've pretty much exemplified it over the past 3 hours. And game is mid, very hard barrier to entry. Play Baldur's Gate 3 instead. Then maybe come to Pathfinder. I'm pretty sure there's like really cool builds you can make, but like I did this without any real help aside from like main quests and side quest guides, and that's about it. But overall, I don't regret my time playing this. I do regret the fucking Crusade mode, however. That fucking sucked ass cheeks. The real regret would have been not having $20 at my side. which is what I'm gonna do for every Alpha game. So yeah, 5 out of 10 game. Never again. Um, yeah, just thanks for watching, and more to come.